check with Griffin and David. Blank check with Griffin and David. Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
Your podcast. She's awaiting your rescue. I'll be your guide.
Perfect. That was never in doubt.
And what I think is really great is how they cast Watto to do the
Thank you.
English dub.
Thank you. Do you know who they actually cast?
You know who does?
You were just listening to the trailer. Do you know who that was doing the voice?
Well, that's what's so funny is I was watching the trailer and all these celebrity names come up and I'm like,
Which one?
I have no idea.
I saw the movie before they cast the dub.
Yeah.
And I was like, DeVito's just sitting by the phone, I assume, right? Like, you know,
Sure.
right?
Who,
Like, you
who
know,
played the Heron?
Take a guess from that cast list.
I saw it go by
just
and
guess.
I was like,
Just guess.
a celebrity?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A huge
celebrity,
A huge
A-list
celebrity.
Charlie
celebrity.
Day.
That would make more sense.
He'd make more
that would
sense.
make more sense.
Probably just because he said DeVito.
Any,
that entered
but
my
any
mind.
Glenn
name,
Howard.
any name you say is going to
Glenn
make
Howard.
more sense.
Someone who's got a real froggy voice.
Let's make it clear.
Doesn't.
From listening to the dub trailer, he nails the voice, right?
He does
Yeah.
a great
The
job.
guy nails the voice.
I
It's
mean,
the
I-
last guy you would think is capable of doing that voice.
I haven't seen the dub, but from the trailer,
From the trailer,
it certainly
sounds like-
he did
Okay,
a good
I got
job.
it. Chris Pratt.
Oh, you don't know either.
No.
It's going to blow your mind. Because on paper, you're like, it's kind of a Chris Pratt where they're like, why did you cast that guy?
Right. But then, of course, the guy actually
not gonna
is
do
a
the
consummate
voice.
professional.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
That would make
Who
more
did
sense.
The Wind Rises.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
make more
That's
sense.
Can we tell you?
Who?
Robert Pattinson.
No
Yes.
way.
Yes.
That's Pattinson,
That
and he
makes-
does it.
Bob?
Yeah, Bobby.
Bobby P.
Our own-
Now, he
Bobby
did
Pat
suck
Pat?
on like 10 vapes at once
Yeah.
before every line reading.
well,
that
his own
makes
pulled the
sense.
tour himself.
You can hear it in
Wait,
the performance.
that honestly makes me really like Robert Pattinson.
Of course.
As it should. As should most of his career decisions
Yeah.
for the last
Yeah.
10 years.
But I'm just saying, like, that's cool.
I
But they
agree.
announced him, and everyone's like, here's another fucking Chris Pratt situation. He's going to show up and be like, I'm the Heron. Or he'll do a weird voice, but it won't be the right weird voice. And he clearly was like, no, I'm going to copy the voice, the original
Yeah, I'll
voice.
do what this guy
I'll do that in English.
The real
That's
guy
cool.
being
Isn't that
Masaki
fucking
Suda.
cool?
I love this movie. I love this movie.
This movie has no quotes page
No.
and it has no tagline. So the
The tagline was like the new film from Hayao Miyazaki,
the
right?
excitement when I did the Watto voice opening was just because David had been verging on a breakdown as JD and I scrubbed through the trailer with captions on, trying to find any line
well, because
to work.
me, Griffin, and Ben,
Yes,
Griffin, Ben, and I,
well said.
we saw the movie yesterday together.
We saw it together.
Obviously, we went subs, not dubs.
Mhm.
And it's such...
I don't even know if you can see it with dubs right
You
now.
can.
Can you? Okay.
You can. Angelica has like one or two showtimes a day are dubs. The rest are subs.
Right. But the dubs are just like a guy just comes to the front of the screen and just sort of yells every line.
Pattinson.
It's bad. He's
Pattinson shows up and
He
does
gives you
all the
popcorn.
voices.
You all saw it together.
We saw it together, and I think it's an overwhelming movie experience
agree with that.
personally.
Mm.
And so there's lines that stick out, but we could not be sure that we had them verbatim.
No,
No.
of course not.
But JD and I were scrubbing through on our phones the trailer, playing it at like 5 seconds apart in a cycle. And JD said, "Is this the moment the podcast breaks up?"
We got a lot to do today.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking
If
about.
you're
This is
looking-
easy, light. This is always the lightest podcasting day of the year for us, a JD doubleheader.
If you're looking at the cast list
Uh-huh.
and you're ranking it by the American cast list.
Sure. By fit?
By, fit for Heron.
Oh.
Hamill is top.
Yeah.
For like who's doing the Heron voice.
But Hamill plays granduncle,
Correct.
which makes a ton of sense.
Willem Dafoe is second. He plays the Pelican.
I would say Defoe actually makes number
Fine,
one most
fine.
sense.
But those two are at the top, right? Then I would say Bautista,
Right.
who plays the Parrot King.
Which is perfect casting.
That makes
Which
total
is
sense.
great casting.
Yeah.
But, you could see him busting out a heron.
Yeah.
And he was the visual inspiration for the guy
Sure.
inside. Then Bale.
Yeah, Bale, more known for voices.
Now I'm going to throw something at you. I think Florence Pugh is
Correct.
more
I agree.
of a read for the heron than Robert
Yes.
Pattinson. The
I-
woman sounds like she smoked 1,000
Yeah.
cigarettes.
I love Pattinson, and Pattinson obviously has tremendous range, but I've also never heard him do a voice that in any way approximates this. Whereas Pugh makes vocal choices.
Pugh basically played the heron in Oppenheimer.
She did.
But I think that's
What
the
a
thing that's
hot
interesting.
fucking Heron.
I think, number one,
Mhm.
A thing that I've constantly been reminded of in my career is that people who love acting
Mm.
love to do interesting things,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then also, this is something that I really want to get into in talking about this movie,
Mhm.
is that there is a certain, the Miyazaki bell rings and people show up.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's like
To-
hard to say no.
and this is final
Right.
film. There
It's
are
almost rude to
you
say
have
no.
big names. I mean, I was just looking what was it? They're big names in like one-line parts in this dub because people are like last chance.
Yes. And
Dan
so,
Stevens and Tony Revolori and Mamadou Afi, I think, play the like random other parakeets.
The chorus of the parakeets.
Right.
right.
Like these are real actors.
Yes.
I can talk a little bit more about this when we sort of get into things, but I did a lot of subtextual work to watch this movie.
Mhm.
I wanted this to be the full experience. So I put in a lot of work. It was happening sort of just anyways in my life,
Not really something you do for this podcast
No.
normally.
but
It's a little
You
weird.
show up, sunglasses on, go, what movie were we talking about today?
what is this? We talking about what Billy?
I don't
Lynn?
watch
Yeah,
movies.
sure.
That's for nerds.
Yeah. What are we rewatchabling today?
I can't believe they let you ride the motorcycle into the building.
Into the building, into the studio.
What if I told you they didn't?
Wow, you're such a
Cool.
rebel.
I don't follow rules.
This guy's such a heron. The heron voice, you've nailed it, is closest to Defoe as Green Goblin
Yeah, sure. Right.
in the realm of voices that exist. Right?
True.
Just that Ham.
Spider-Man.
I think Hamill has to be top because he's actually the master of 1,000 voices.
Okay,
Sure.
But to getting what I was going to say is I did an entire Miyazaki rewatch
Oh, sure.
before this film.
And read
And-
several books.
And that was happening before
Okay.
you guys asked me to do this.
You
and then
read
it
Starting
dovetailed.
Point and
Turning Point. I also
which are
read
books
Miyaz-
I cite a lot on those episodes.
I
Right.
also read Miyazaki World, and
I
then
don't know that one.
it's like
It's about a kid who gets sucked into a weird other dimension.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh, I've seen this cover. Yeah.
it's fine. I mostly read it for the first part, which is more biographical. I was more interested in that. A lot of it is like thematic breakdowns of the films, which is like interesting, but I was more interested in sort of primary sourced biography stuff. And then I was reading already stuff about Japanese cinema and the history of Japanese cinema and story stuff related to that I also want to talk about today. But that is all to say, this is the first time that I, in this rewatched, I did all dubs.
Oh, interesting.
I'd never seen any of the dubs,
Mm.
and so I did all of the dubs in chronological order.
Which do you think is the best of?
It's so interesting because they have a lot of recurring cast.
Mhm.
The dub that I didn't like was Porco Rosso.
Oh,
Keaton.
see, I mean, I just think Keaton's unbelievable.
I think it's such a weird. I think it's so.
I've definitely heard that dub.
The movie has such a expressiveness and such a a fancy, and Keaton's playing it so low that it creates a weird
Interesting.
friction to me.
Yeah.
I will say I think Howl's Moving Castle actually is a really good
The
dub.
Howl's dub is surprisingly good. And the
'Cause
Crystal
Bale is
casting.
Howl.
Bale is great, but also the Crystal casting, you're like, oh,
Crystal
shit. And then
is-
Crystal nails it.
Crystal
Crystal's
is
great.
so good.
You're so ready for that to get
Calcifer.
cloying, and then it works.
I think all the dubs are very impressive.
Yes.
Like I think they do a good job with those.
Yeah, they really care.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean obviously excluding the now forgotten
Mononoke.
early dubs. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean I've listened to the Ponyo dub a million times because I watch it almost every day.
But you're talking the Disney era G Kids now
Yeah.
acquired.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where
The
they're
second
really-
wave dubs.
Yeah.
They did them right. I mean, here's the other thing I like about the Pattinson thing. It does kind of feel like, and G Kids wants to get the best cast they can.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's throwing themselves at this because it's the last chance to do a Miyazaki dub, what have you. It does feel a little like Pattinson being like, I'm a big enough star that they'll let me do this. And if I do it, I ensure that it sounds like the character rather than anyone else coming in and trying to put their own spin on it.
I like that idea. I hope that that's where it came from.
Like,
I like the idea that he's in there protecting it. I also could see a version of it where he's just like, yeah, I want to just like, I want to
that
go.
sounds
I
fun.
want to do it.
I've
I
always
wanna,
wanted to play a hero.
I want to do it.
Yeah.
Like for real.
Yeah.
But I like the idea. I like the idea that people are coming to protect this thing.
Totally. I mean, I was going back and forth between subs and dubs when we were doing those episodes years ago.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to watch. And I'll do this sometimes too with like the voiceover stuff I've done. now with streaming, you can toggle between different countries.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see like which people go, my job is to do that characterization in
Yeah.
English. And which people go, I was cast. I'm doing my take on this.
Well, it's interesting. I was watching the Wind Rises dub,
Mhm.
and there's a wide variance of the type of performance that people are giving.
Yes.
There's
That
a-
is the strangest dub to me.
Well, that's also the one I think
It's set in Japan. It's the weirdest one in a way. Like these are Japanese characters.
But then the Herzog performance is kind of astonishing.
Yes, but then there's like what's his name from The Office?
Which one?
Krasinski.
Krasinski.
Yeah.
He's-
Fuck, I forgot that.
He's doing a lot more of a animation.
He's doing
thing.
like a DreamWorks voice.
Yeah, where he's like,
Yeah.
well, it's time for me to go to work today. And I love, and then he'll be in scenes with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's doing a very like realistic, like, you know, empathetic performance.
he's
And then
kind
those
of-
things
Human
don't.
actor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gordon Levitt's kind of doing the Pattinson thing of like, I place my stardom in this spot
Yeah.
to preserve the way this character should be played.
That's also the dub where there was an article that was, I think we talked about this when we did the Totoro
Mhm.
episode, but like there was an article that was about, it was lauding how wonderful it was that they were able to adapt the script into English in a way that actually they adapted it to make it more appealing to an American audience. And they were saying it in a positive way, but then when they gave all the examples, they like hurt my heart because it was
Yes.
taking these like very Miyazaki, very interesting lines and turning them into like, you know, I've always loved you. And I'm like, no, the first thing, like, even if it doesn't culturally translate, like, let it be that so that there's some mystery of how this all connects and what the meanings are so that we can sort of glean the sort of cultural reverberations of it versus being like, nah, you know, they're just saying they love each other.
Isn't there like a big 90s Disney Renaissance guy who oversaw all those adaptations for a while?
I don't know.
Not
Yeah, I
Don
know that.
Hall, but someone like that.
I can't remember.
David, you seem so excited today.
I think we should introduce our podcast.
It's
I'm
Blank Check
worried
with
that we're
Griffin and
too, locked into this. Yes.
Two in the
it's
weeds already.
I'm
yeah,
Griffin.
Yeah. I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce. Baby, this is a mini series on the films of Hayao Miyazaki that was done 4 years ago that we are now concluding with his final film.
He says he's going to make another one.
Does he actually?
Yeah, and everyone says that he'll continue making
He'll
films until
continue
he
to work
cannot.
until he dies.
But do we think that is possible?
Anything is possible.
As Kevin Garnett once said,
Anything is
anything
possible.
is possible.
He's been just kind of upfront about, like, even though I've made this movie that I know is very much about a man's legacy and what he leaves behind and like saying goodbye. Yeah, I'm fucking back in the studio. I've got lots of ideas. Like,
Wow.
I'm Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah, he's already
What am I supposed to do?
there was another project that it was either going to be that or this.
Okay.
And I think theoretically it's like, oh, now I'm going to start working on that one.
His Alita battle.
He's
he'll
also-
tinker away.
Yeah.
What was the other project?
It's like, I think like the Earwig and the Witch or something.
No, that got made.
Right,
His,
that was-
his son made
Yeah.
it.
Oh,
That was the CGI one
It's-
that people did not like.
It's not very good.
because he was debating whether to do that or
Yeah,
this. And then
his
he
son
had his
made it.
son do that.
That's a full Alita situation.
It's an Alita situation.
Yes.
Go
Where
ahead.
Cameron was developing Alita and Avatar.
Right. Yeah.
And was like, I don't know which one I'm going to do. It's one or the other. And I'll do one and then immediately do the other. And then he did Avatar and he was like, actually, Robert
I
Rodriguez
love
is going to
this.
do Alita.
And yeah, right. Someone else. I'm trying to find the
I
name.
forget
of
what
who
the other
you're
title
talking
is then. I apologize. I'm sorry.
about. It might be that though, but I also like maybe he's just in there and he's like, I've always wanted to do like a remake of fucking, Night Moves. That, Gene Hackman movie.
How great would that be?
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, who knows what it is?
So we
I've really been looking to get into live action. I'm done with animation. I've
we
been looking to
interrupted you
springboard this.
introducing what your podcast
Yeah, I'm going to do Thor 5. Finally, I got my
that's-
foot in the door.
he got
How exciting would it
signed
be?
on to do fucking Eternals too.
Yeah, we've heard your feedback. You want the Thor movies to be less goofy. Hayao Miyazaki is making his live-action debut. J.D. Amato is our guest, returning to the show
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
for what's basically become your annual slots.
Yeah, in December we try to get a couple records in
Yeah.
all at once. No, I'm really excited. And it was an honor that you guys asked me to come back for this movie.
This was pinned like 6 months ago, I want to say, when we were like, oh, it's finally coming out. And I went,
I agree.
oh, we should have, JD should come on a date.
All this says Lasseter and Doctor. Everything I'm finding. I think you're right that there was like a Don Hall
I'm
type.
trying to remember who it is because it's a big figure in animation who had the
It's
attitude
not that.
Yeah.
of
got
what
it.
you're saying of just like, I'm really excited and I take this seriously and I want to do it well.
Yeah.
But he put a little too much of his own spin on it,
Yeah.
arguably.
But I do love the Ponyo dub. I'm used to it now. Very used to it. I've seen the Spirited Away dub several times. I think because that was
right.
That might be it though. I'm not very familiar with the other dubs. Have I seen the Kiki dub? We probably talked about all this on the episode. Doesn't matter.
Probably.
I would like to see this dub. I'm
Yeah.
intrigued.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to Miyazaki.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about with this movie.
Nah, this movie's fucking an inch deep. Nothing going on with this one.
Also, I'll say it. I've heard that the Totoro episode, maybe people felt like there was too many bits.
I don't think so.
We're gonna make this a bit light episode.
You yesterday said, perhaps on the record, this is bit free.
No bits.
Packaged as bit free.
No bits.
Stamp the label on it.
Well, maybe squeeze maybe a little bit in the end. But listen, truly, there's
This is
so much that I
serious.
want to talk about here.
Right.
Okay.
We saw this yesterday, as you said, in the basement of
Angelica.
the Angelica, trains whipping around us on all sides, theater shaking.
The Angelica, of course, the downtown theater in New York that is so committed to providing a mediocre viewing experience. They've done everything they can.
But I think it's a great.
They do have good popcorn.
It's also a great
do.
way to watch a movie because it's a very old theater. You descend escalators down and you see all of they have the little names of the movies above the theater number.
It has that old-fashioned quality that's nice.
and they
That's
keep
true.
the doors open until the film starts. So you
Or
can
sometimes
sort of,
even after it starts.
Yes, but you can sort of see people watching and you're like, this is a place of cinema. And I will say there was moments during the film where I was like, ooh, there's this sort of ominous rumble happening in them. And I was like, I had to
Sometimes-
remind myself.
Right. And you're like, and then you hear someone saying, like, this train is to
Yeah.
Coney
Sometimes
Island.
it syncs up perfectly. Just to be
Yes.
clear, the
Yes.
Angelica, a theater in a basement that
Underneath.
also features B, D, F, and M
It's
stops.
underneath Broadway Lafayette Station.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's
There's
MTA subway.
It feels like it's sandwiched in between two train tracks.
There's
And as
Dolby
JD is
5.1.
right,
Yes.
And Angelica has 5.1.1. The extra
has
speaker
5.
is the train.
5.1 point BDFM. Sometimes you're watching a movie and there is this rumble and you're like, yeah, that's part of the movie. And then
Correct.
you're like, right, no, it's the subway.
The other thing is sometimes the train passes and suddenly there's a stillness that feels profound.
also profound. Look, this is this kind of stuff Miyazaki probably wants you thinking about.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well-
The theater will briefly achieve a state of ma when the train has left the station.
There's two questions that I want to start with
Yeah.
to open this discussion. The first is I would like to know where everyone is at with Miyazaki in their life. And David and Ben and I were talking about this before, is that I re-listened to a couple episodes
Which
of
ones?
I don't remember which ones.
Jeez,
Of the
guess
pop-
they rocked.
what is
They
this
were
energy?
so good.
David's energy is unbelievable today.
No, what episodes you don't remember?
I don't
Okay,
remember.
okay.
I think Emily's episode,
Okay, she was on Castle in the Sky.
Castle in the
Yeah.
Sky, and then one or two others. I forget which one. Ehrlich, maybe.
Ehrlich was on Mononoke.
Mononoke.
Right?
No, Ehrlich
No,
was
he
on
was on
Howl.
Howl's Moving Castle.
I sort of have
Griffin
them on the
McElroy
background.
was on Mononoke.
I sort of have them on the background, so it's like they're sort of ephemeral in my mind a little bit.
Sure.
But one of the themes I picked up on, so famously, it's been long since recorded that David, early in our friendship, referred to Griffin as I as dumb animation nerds.
Of course.
I believe was the
No, I did that on this podcast because you two were going on about whatever the fuck. And
I'll tell you what we were going on about. The use of 3D in Coraline.
Oh my gosh,
It was in
David.
reaction. No. Okay, this is what it was.
Wow, this is what you're gonna have to release an apology.
Yep.
No, I won't.
Yes, you will.
No, I won't.
Yes, you will.
No, I won't. And we already did this fucking discussion the last time you were on for
But you know-
Coraline, right? Like,
Because
that
you always
last
feel like you have to
episode?
defend
I
it.
don't have to defend anything. But then on that episode,
Yes, we will.
who's the California Raisins guy? I was
Will Vinton.
Where you're like, Will Vinton. I'm like, I don't know who that is. And the two of you are like, Will Vinton. And it's like, it's so hilarious.
What? Playdream, motherfucker.
Leads into you being animation.
A modern American
Also,
tragedy.
what a disrespectful way to refer to Will Vinton. Who's the fucking California Raisins guy?
Doing it again.
Oh my god. Anyway,
Oh my god.
Some fucking guy named Will Vinton.
but it's just so funny because
Some
you're like,
clown
you
with a
guys
mustache.
dared call us animation dorks. Anyway, I'm
No,
like, who's
no,
Will Vinton? You guys are like, yeah.
Dumb
It's so
animation
funny.
And then,
nerds.
Yeah,
but
right.
then now in 2023, you're like, I don't know, the dumb raisin guy.
I didn't call him dumb. I called you dumb.
Some dumb
He's obviously a
plasticine
major
fool.
talent.
Okay, but an interesting thing about our dumb animation nerdum.
Sure.
Griffin's a Disney boy.
Yeah.
He grew up on the Disney Pixar.
Yeah.
That's his meat and potatoes.
I'm less a Miyazaki guy than the two of you are. Yeah.
You're not a Miyazaki.
I don't think you are a Miyazaki guy.
No, I'm not.
Because
I'm
you've
not.
really not really seen hardly any of them before we did the pod.
Before we did the pod, I had only seen Spirited Away and Totoro.
And I don't feel like they touched your heart in quite the way.
Well, clearly,
I
had
mean-
they touched your heart, you would have gone
Yes.
to the other ones. Right?
No, I mean Totoro. I still struggle with, although I owed it another watch. Spirited
Which
Away.
is wild because I think it's like the greatest animated film of all time.
I just rewatched
where?
it with my
I've
daughter.
heard
Well,
of
I
it.
can talk about me.
Yeah.
You talk about you.
And then Spirited Away, I didn't like when I saw it the first time because I was dumb, unintelligent, not a dumb animation nerd, which would have helped me. I wasn't approaching it from the right mind. And then when we rewatched it for the show, I loved it.
Right.
But I do think I still struggle with him in certain ways. And there are films of his I wholeheartedly love. And there are other films of his I do kind of fight to feel. I'll also say, I mean, I think I had a big Japanese animation block for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of it
Same,
was just
right.
sensibility and style. And I do think doing that series helped break that down a little bit. But I also feel like post that I have gotten more into some other filmmakers.
Right.
Than perhaps Miyazaki speaks to me specifically.
I think that's a fascinating place to be. And that's a really, I think that's a really interesting place to come to this movie with.
But I think, I mean, there is no part of me that questions him being one of the most important artists in the
Who do you
medium
like?
ever. I mean, I love Satoshi Kon.
Sure.
I'm going to butcher his name, but the Suzume, Your Name, Weathering with You
Mhm.
guy, I love. I mean, that's like
Makoto Shinkai.
Shinkai. It is like a major run for me. And I've been watching more shows and stuff, but I mean, it's not like I'm not.
It's not your.
Yeah. No, but I
Feel.
think that's a really interesting place to come to this because this movie is,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, I think this movie works best when viewed through all of the context around it that built up to this film.
Well, this is why I wanted to say 3 of us saw it together. The 2 of you were crying,
yes.
right? The lights come up and both of you were like, I cried multiple times.
Me AF when I saw it
Right.
as well. Yes.
And I immediately was like, I'm still trying to puzzle this out.
Yeah.
Not like I don't like this, but I do feel like I struggled to get my head around this movie, which I felt with certain Miyazaki films
Yeah.
when we were watching them. And some of them I've rewatched, by the way, since the series. Some of them I've not, and I owe them rewatches. That series was also happening at a bad time in my life that I think was reflected somewhat in the episodes.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you as well. Yes.
yeah, that's this. I think I brought this up on the Cursed Talking the Walk last year, and it didn't make it to the cut. But I
We never
I think
cut
it did.
anything
I
out
think
of
it did
that
make it
episode.
to the cut.
I don't think it did.
I think it's important
maybe.
because everyone listened to that
Well,
episode.
no,
Yes.
that was a scripted episode, and we just read what was on the
Exactly.
That episode
right.
was fictional, by the way.
But the Totoro episode was, when we recorded it, it was shortly after my sister had passed away unexpectedly.
Yes.
And that movie means a lot to me. And I think it's such a pure depiction of family and especially
Being a
siblinghood.
kid. Yes. Yeah.
And so in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, of course I
You were
wanted
kind
to
of-
engage more in bits and all that because like
Right.
it was hard to, Miyazaki touches me in such a visceral way.
Same.
And what I think is beautiful about him, and I think can be hard, and especially for this film. In this
Mhm.
film, he's quoted as saying, like, I don't even really understand all of it.
right.
Which I think is a really beautiful thing, is that a lot of this is just things that he's pulling from within himself. And if they touch you, I think they really can touch you.
Yeah.
And-
Which there were certainly moments that got to me. And I'm not looking for like a metaphor codex. You know, it's not like I was sitting there being like, I can't crack this one onto the next
Yeah,
one.
right.
And I've like come to understand the flow of his films being different than so much of what I watch, and needing to process them in a different way and open yourself up and
Right.
engage with them in a different way. And some of them it does work for me, and other ones I without diminishing them, feel like I haven't gotten there yet on that one, right?
Yeah.
And this definitely felt like one of those for me. Two things I kept on thinking about a lot while watching it. I think it is weirdly similar to Wendell and Wild, in an approach of guys who were just like, do I make another movie ever again? This process
Sure.
takes like 7 years, and it keeps on having these stops and starts. And Wendell and Wild, similar to this, feels like a buffet line movie where he just keeps on putting stuff on the plate. David, your Letterboxd log was to this effect. That like the
was
first
my
half
fear.
of the movie,
Right. While I'm watching.
you're like, you don't want to just like maybe go back to the table, eat some of this, and then maybe you can go back for seconds.
Right.
And it's like, no, we're putting this on, we're putting this on, we're putting this on. Can you resolve all of this?
Right.
Wendell Wild, a movie that like overstimulates most people,
Right.
and they just tap out like 30 minutes in. And I think it's a kind of a messy masterpiece, but it does ultimately work for me. I was watching this getting overwhelmed by like how much it was loading on.
But
I think there's some really interesting context to when you understand how the film was made
Yes.
and what it was made, that then answers some of the questions of that.
And I understand, admittedly, a small percentage of that. And then talking after the movie,
Yeah.
you filled in more of it. And I've been excited to talk about it now today.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about, just in terms of my struggles with Miyazaki sometimes, I think in a certain way, philosophically, the filmmaker, I don't want to say philosophically, but in their relationship to their dialogue with like humanity and existence and the world, like the biggest concepts, he is weirdly similar to Werner Herzog for me,
Sure.
where it's like he's staring straight into the sun.
Yes.
There is like a very sober, like, this is what it is. I'm not mincing words, right? And then Werner Herzog works on a much more literal level very often, although there are obviously zags from that. And Miyazaki translates that mostly into feeling then, right? But they are about this, like, we cannot hide from this. This is the conversation that we are in. And Herzog, I find him weirdly relaxing, even when he's directly staring at the things I find most upsetting in the world. There's something about Miyazaki filtering that through sort of like dream language.
Right.
And obviously his films are very dreamlike, where I sometimes find them too painful to
Sure.
deal with.
I
And it's
understand
similar
that.
to like Wind Rises, which is an episode where I completely spiraled. It is a movie I think is great, but I was like, I cannot handle this. I cannot handle this.
Right.
And this movie at times was like crystal clear to me on an emotional level. And I was like, this is hitting me really hard. Other times I was really locked into just the beauty of what was happening. And other times I was like, I understand what he's talking about here, and I like need to leave this conversation.
Right.
I can just not handle it. I'm too weak. It has the feeling of
You're weak.
when I wake up in the morning and there's a dream that doesn't make sense to me, but it was clearly poking at a bruise that is very raw for me. And I'm like, I will get no resolution on this. This is now just conjured up feelings that cannot be resolved in my real life.
to poke the bruise.
Griffin, what if I told you, I will be your guide?
Well, this is what I'm waiting for.
Now, David, what is your relationship with Miyazaki?
I love Hayao Miyazaki's films very deeply. I've seen them all many times.
Did you watch, were you exposed to them as a kid or as an adult?
No, not at all. I
Yeah.
think it's almost certainly me seeing Spirited Away in theaters when I'm a 16-year-old cineast and being like, this is my jam. You
Yeah.
know?
That was your
'Cause
first one?
Can't remember if it was that or I think I might have seen one. Okay, but it like probably on TV, like
Yeah,
on tape
right.
or whatever, and it didn't have quite the impact. But I just, as someone who is not an anime fan, right?
Mhm.
Like
Right.
never got into it, apart from Pokemon, of course. We love.
Gotta catch them all.
Shout out Diglett.
Mhm.
Gotta catch them all. I'll just shout out a different Pokemon every week.
Great.
Uh,
Every week that we do the this episode.
like
This is
you
the new format of the show going into 24, by the way.
yeah, Pokemon recap and Miyazaki
Year of the
existential crises.
Yeah. You do sound kind of like the Heron today.
I
You're
do-
raspy.
I had a cold, and yesterday I was talking so much because I was at the critic circle
Humble brag.
and I was yelling results to people because I'm the counter.
You're the counter?
I am. I'm the counter.
He gets results.
been the counter for. I literally get results.
Do you wear like a barrister's wig?
I wear a barrister's wig. No, why would I wear
Yeah.
a barrister's wig?
'Cause you're the
Barristers
counter.
count?
What are you talking about?
They have to count.
Why would you? I don't know, because you take your job seriously?
Yeah, because you care about the sanctity of the process.
Yeah.
I imagine it's all of you in an underground chasm around a marble circular table. You're in a barrister's
Why would
wig
we
with
be
an
underground?
abacus.
Yeah.
And then people in cloaks hand you like pieces of sharp metal that
Right.
account for votes.
So
And you go, 1 vote for.
it's that, except
Killers of the
instead
Flower
of a
Moon.
chasm, we're in a sort of meeting room at the Film Society Lincoln Center. And instead of metal objects, we have pieces of paper that people have scribbled things on.
But there is an abacus and you do wear a barrister's
Jordan
wig.
Hoffman brought an abacus one year as a joke, and then 2 minutes in was like, "Yeah, get this out
funny
of here." Yeah,
You're
get that.
surrounded with the skulls of past members of the org.
Of course,
right?
Andrew
Yeah.
Saris
Yeah.
looks at us from a shelf. His body has been stuffed and mounted.
And then you
Um,
decide who wins the Oscars.
Right. And then we keep saying that. We're like,
Yeah.
ha 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 ha, they shall win. What was I saying? Oh, I love Miyazaki, obviously. But the big, I mean, I love him. I mean, you can listen to the past episodes. The big thing for
Or
me,
don't.
you don't think they should?
I don't know. I did, but well, yeah,
You're
not
clearly
important.
filled with regret.
Yeah.
I am
Much
not.
like a Miyazaki character.
No regrets.
Yeah.
But I have a daughter.
Yeah.
Humble
And one of the first things I would watch with her when she was a little baby is there's something on HBO Max or whatever it's called now. Zaslav's House of Fun.
Max is the one to watch when you want to watch HBO. What do you mean?
Right.
That's very easy to
It's
remember.
called Zax now.
The
Zach
logo is his
Zhao.
little glasses. The logo is just that picture of him and Graydon Carter look like they're like two guys who just shot an elephant. You know, they're in like these white suits.
At the con party while the strike's happening.
Yeah.
Why didn't anyone show up?
I'm sorry, we can cut that out if it's going to affect any future business for you, me making fun of David Zaslav.
I think
mean-
it'll be okay.
Thanks, Ben. Ben's my. You guys, I haven't told you. Ben's my manager now.
Ben's your manager, and you guys are pitching Zaslav hard.
Yeah.
You're like, here's a great project for you to sink money in and then never air. Tax break. It's
You're-
like a producer.
You're pitching Zaslav to Zaslav, right? You're pitching Zaslav tonight.
Exactly.
People just haven't gotten to know you yet.
Um,
The only reason to like you is they haven't heard you talk. David,
yes.
happy holidays.
Oh, thank you. See you later.
Okay, bye. Ding dong.
Who's at the door?
I don't know. You should probably go open it.
Creek.
Hello.
Hello, who's this?
Don't you recognize me?
No. Can't see
My
you. So dark.
large Sack,
Okay, you got a sack.
my long robe,
Okay.
my hat, my jangling bells.
Uh-huh. What are you, a cowboy?
I'm Stompus.
What is Stompus?
Well, we all know.
Oh boy. Everyone's laughing. Not
We
a
all
good
know
sign.
Stampa Claus.
No. What?
Stampa Claus who brings you stamps for Christmas. And I'm the evil version of Stampa Claus. My name is Stompus.
I'm sorry. You are the evil version of a stamps.com promo character?
Have you not met him yet? Am I sort of jumping ahead in line?
Yeah.
I was told that Stampa Claus had already done a bunch
That
of
the
ad reads.
IP had some real footholds.
You're telling me that I'm riffing on a thing that was not established
I don't
within
know.
the canon
Did you
of
do
this
this
show?
and I wasn't here for it?
Me? I would definitely have never
Okay,
met
fine.
either of these guys. This is all new to me.
All
What's
right.
your deal?
I'm Stompus.
Okay, so you're kind of like the Krampus to Santa Claus is the idea.
I think Krampus is kind of the Stompus to me, if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay, well, what's up, Stompus?
Well, we all know that Stampa Claus. We all know from Stampa Claus. We know how he works. He brings the good children, the boys and girls of the world, their own stamps. He goes to the post office, he picks them up, he drops them off in their stockings.
Yes.
That is not how Stampus works.
Okay.
Stampus allows you to print your own postage at home.
Oh, okay. Much like stamps.com.
Right. I don't want to have to make the house calls.
Do you send anyone a free scale?
I send them the scale, I send them the printer.
Okay, okay.
Yes. And then I go, you put whatever you want on there. Maybe
so,
put me, my smiling
do you
face,
have
me,
maybe,
Stampus.
Like, would you recommend maybe people use the stamps.com mobile app to get take care of orders on the go?
Yeah, I should mention, I don't have a competing business. I just,
Right.
I
you
just
are
work with-
advertising stamps.com.
Yeah, I'm not on payroll. Like, I'm not an official, but I endorse their product and I send it to children.
And you endorse the fact that Stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart if you're selling products online.
Yeah, it makes my life a lot easier.
Okay, and it's been indispensable for over 1 million businesses for 25 years.
Mine, one of them.
Okay,
Stampis Industries.
Let me tell you something. Give your business the gift of Stamps.com so your mailing and shipping is covered this holiday season.
Okay.
Sign up with promo code CHECK for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale with no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code CHECK. I just wanted to say all that because I feel like your thing is so convoluted it might mess with the
Well, you're
live
a paid
reads.
sponsor. You have copy. I do not.
Right, exactly.
They do not pay me to endorse their product.
Your lore is so confusing. I just didn't want to really get in the middle of it. No. No. Close the door.
Oh, Merry Stamp Miss.
Oh, get out of here, you jerk.
Am I late?
Yeah, you're late. Sure.
Oh, no.
You were supposed to queue up this guy. Clearly. All right. Bye.
Bye.
There's a thing on HBO Max called like Miyazaki backgrounds, essentially. That's just like a montage of like landscapes with set to very plaintive Joe Hisaishi movie music that I used to put on just to chill my daughter out when she was not really watching like narrative television, but you could just put on like pictures.
Something that I was reading about
Something I loved.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah. And
something I was reading about was that Miyazaki agreed to license all of his stuff to the streamers to fund this movie.
Yes.
Right. That makes, because this is the most expensive Japanese film ever made.
Yeah.
But now my daughter was Ponyo for Halloween. Ponyo is the first movie she ever saw.
She's seen it 8,000 times.
I mean, she's seen it so many times, and she refers to anytime. Like when we watched Totoro recently.
Yeah.
And the little boy in that basically looks like the little boy in Ponyo, and she was like, "Sosuke, that's Sosuke," and I was like, "It's not, but sure, that's Sosuke."
Go off.
Yeah, go off. I still think Ponyo is the easiest for a little kid because even Totoro is a little more emotionally intense, and Totoro, the being, he's cool, but he's scary. He's kind of intense.
I think Totoro has a lot of adult POV of childhood, whereas Ponyo, you're like living in. Even just how it's animated, it's like it's child brain,
and it's so energetic and filled with like laughter and screaming and running and hugging and
also
things.
Ponyo loves ham.
Ponyo loves ham.
Yeah.
And of course, it has my ultimate crush in it. Mega babe, hottest woman in cinema ever. Sosuke's mom. Sosuke's. You
don't remember this?
She's super hot. She's so hot.
Also, just this voice is a good.
I'm just like some
David
kind of
character.
Like TikTok montage of like Sosuke's mom with like some guy screaming.
And the number one,
Tron 10,000.
Right,
you've been waiting for it. The number one.
With your raspy voice, you sound like a monster truck announcer.
Start your engines.
Sosuke's mom.
Sosuke's mom would do great at a monster truck rally. She drives like a demon.
Ladies and gentlemen, rev your engines. The top 5 times when I cried during a Miyazaki film. Coming in at number 5.
This is Macho Man David Sims.
I cry. The thing, you know what really stands up? I cry at the end of Ponyo all the time. And I've seen it so many times at this point. I watch it with my daughter. It's in the end always gets me. It's so powerful. And it's not even one of his more emotional endings. It's just so perfect.
Absolutely.
They kiss and then she turns into a girl. Anyway, I saw this film at its premiere, at the world premiere of the, non-Japanese version of I was watching it with subtitles, obviously, but like the world premiere of this outside of Japan.
It had come out in Japanese theaters already.
Correct. It came out in the summer in Japan.
And one of the coolest movies of all time with zero marketing.
Zero trailer and just a poster that's just a heron.
Yeah.
The eye. Wasn't the poster just the close-up of the eye, basically?
It's like the heron in profile.
Sure.
It's like, And I saw it at the Toronto International Film Festival opening night. Usually the opening night movie there is kind of like a, crappy crowd pleaser.
Sure.
This is The Boy and the Heron. We're all seated at the Princess of Wales. Obviously, Miyazaki doesn't come. He doesn't fucking, want it. So he
was busy seeing American Fiction.
I think Toshio Suzuki came. He may not have even come because he's kind of old at this point. Like a producer came out.
Yeah.
And basically was like, Miyazaki-san is like so happy for you to see this film, and we hope that you enjoy it. Like, we worked very hard on it. Thank you and goodbye. You know, like that was it.
Yeah.
Rather than the usual, like, all right, let's bring up this guy plays Jim the Fucker.
Yeah.
He's got 2 great scenes, and here he is. You know, like for like
Right.
20 minutes. You know,
Jim the fucker.
I'm
Wait,
a
what
little
movie was that?
that Jim the Fucker didn't win any. The awards campaign has died this season on the
Look,
Vine.
maybe he can get a SAG nom, and you know, maybe restart it.
Had you
Remind me who played Jim the Fucker?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
If you don't know, you don't deserve to know.
Okay.
David, had you stayed cold on any information coming
knew
out of Japan?
nothing.
Okay.
Like, truly nothing.
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't much to know.
I think
No.
they had
'Cause they
maybe
didn't
released
release
like
that
4
No, but that's why I'm
stills.
saying, like, when it opened in Japan, there was a bit of a like, well, now if you want to dig online, you
I
can
could
find
have gone
it.
to Reddit and
Yes.
found people basically in English saying like, "Hey, I've seen the film. I speak both
Basic
languages,
shape
and
of
like,
the film.
here's what it's about, or
Yeah.
whatever." I did not do that.
You
Yeah.
were going in basically.
They had released 4 promotional stills, and I think
Yeah.
I had seen those once or twice,
Sure.
but that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw the film, and I felt like Griffin initially, of like an overburdened waiter.
Right.
You know, I don't know how
You
am I
want
supposed
mozzarella
to.
sticks and spring rolls?
Actually, maybe I do. You know, but yeah, being like I'm trying to keep track of all this information so I can understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to worry, like, look, I think this is interesting and very like stimulating, but maybe
Sure.
this is going to be like a weird one.
He's not
a
going to pull it together.
masterpiece.
Yes.
And then he pulled it together so devastatingly well that I felt a fool for
Right.
ever having doubted him in the intervening 2 hours. You know, like just then.
You have still only seen it the one time?
No, I rewatched it.
Oh,
for this.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my question.
And I'm
Thank you
going to
for
go see it
answering it.
again at BAM next week with my friend Rachel, who's desperate to get back on this podcast. Makes fun of me a lot. Rachel Sanders.
Well, then we'll have her back on.
All right. Let's find a movie for her.
I
Boy and
mean,
Heron too.
She likes to make fun of me for not having her back on. It's a bit we have.
well, sounds funny.
Yeah, it is funny.
Was it
For
a long
her.
time ago?
Terminator. Long time
Very
ago.
long.
Whoa.
Year 2. First year of BC proper.
Dang.
1 BC.
Wow.
Wow.
I know. How did it take 9 years to get to that joke?
It's a solid joke.
David, I assume you were not going to try to take your daughter to this. This is not one. No.
She wouldn't care for this.
Yeah.
No, we've yet to go to a film in theaters because she's too young. Though we're getting close.
Well, also,
and I
Elemental
wonder,
was sold out every showing.
couldn't get through the crowd.
She was dying to see it.
I love the Fire Bodega.
Claude.
Fucking movie. It's gonna like win the Oscar this year or some bullshit. Not impossible.
It's not impossible.
This obviously could win, but
Yeah.
Spider-Verse could win. But
Yeah.
there's a world where Elemental wins
Yeah. And we just fold it up.
over The Boy and the
We
Heron.
fold it up. We call it picture wrap on movies.
I did not see Elemental.
It's bad.
No,
No.
why not?
Uh,
Racist against the fire people, I guess.
Yeah. You think they should stay in their part of town.
You just don't like them.
or
you're
you racist against the water people.
Ooh.
Do you think they're hoity?
now I'm
What's
trying to figure out
important
what mapping
is-
game Griffin's playing.
I'm playing the mapping game,
the
relaying to
Elemental
you the
does.
mapping game that they do that
Oh,
doesn't
really?
make sense.
My favorite joke about Elemental now is when people say they haven't seen it, for me to be like, yeah, well, that's because you're a racist, which is the message of the movie, I guess.
I bet you
Fire
don't even
people.
think about how dirt people would take that news. The movie doesn't even really bother itself with the dirt people.
No, they're kind of like, they're trees, I guess, anyway.
Right.
You know,
the movie almost has a racist attitude of saying, like, the dirt people are kind of less
and the air
important.
people barely get any fucking rope either. It's
They're
a movie
bossy.
about elemental people,
The
and
air
yet it only
people are
cares about
bossy,
2 out of
David.
4
What are you
elements.
talking about? The air people are bossy and they love their air ball.
Yeah, they play a sport that's like air basketball. I don't know the whole thing.
I
It's just
can't
like, I can't believe
Listen
this
to
was
this
allowed.
anymore.
I mean,
stop telling
David's
me things
review,
about
his
this
letterbox-
movie.
His letterbox line is the best summation of the movie ever, which was catastrophic metaphor collapse.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
Ben, what's your Miyazaki?
yeah, how you feeling about
History.
Hayao Miyazaki?
I had never watched any of his movies until we
the
covered him
miniseries,
on
yeah.
the show, and I have what's that?
No, I was just gonna say JD walking out, with the lights come up and he's wiping away tears, and he goes, "I don't think a Miyazaki movie has ever actually made me cry before." And you wiping away tears go, not me.
Yeah, well, yeah, this movie definitely got me. I'll just say that I have, since we did the miniseries, revisited Kiki.
Your
Yeah.
favorite.
Because I
It's about
Love
life
that.
in the big
Kiki
city,
is
man.
incredible. Kiki is such an incredible movie.
Kiki the movie, where we came in to record on a Saturday afternoon, and Ben was watching it on the couch weeping.
It's such a gentle. I mean, there's so much to like about Kiki's Delivery Service.
Yeah. And then I recently showed my girlfriend Spirited Away for the first time.
Oh,
wow.
sure.
And she, as someone who is so anti cartoons,
Yeah.
right, was like, wow, I can't believe that something can be so deep.
She's a bit of an
Yeah.
Eddie Valiant in general.
I don't know what that means.
It's Bob Hoskins' character in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who is prejudiced against tunes,
Doesn't
much
like
as
tunes.
JD is prejudiced against the fire people.
Thank you for translating, David.
They should only have working class jobs. They can't make art. That's for sure.
I don't even know the
The
context
thing
of
is,
this.
everything I'm saying is in that
We're not
movie.
exaggerating
I'm
any.
not taking the ball and running
We're
with it.
almost doing direct quotes.
That's the movie's vibe.
Fire people shouldn't make glass.
Obviously, the movie's vibe is that these beliefs are wrong, but it is that these beliefs are prevalent in elemental society,
Fire people
which is highly stratified and
should stick-
bureaucratic.
to selling embers, which is also her name,
Sure.
and keeping flames alive. They shouldn't make glass.
How dare you even suggest it?
I just haven't seen this movie, so I just
Katie
don't
Rich
know.
likes to say that the water guy, the main water guy in Elemental, is the biggest cuck in the history
I would agree
of
with that.
cinema, and it's true. Anyway,
It's weird they didn't cast Jason Clarke to play him. So
it's Mamadou Athie, who of course is also in this movie.
Yeah.
The Dup.
David, I now have a question for you
Okay.
that I'd like you to turn on your professional
Okay.
critic brain
Here
for.
we go.
put the barrister
All right,
away.
Hannah Rosen is interviewing me on the Atlantic podcast. I'll be
Well, it's-
professional.
I feel like I've done this before is in our friendship where I really like to ask questions about your critical process because I think it's fascinating to me.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like at many lunches I've been like, walk me through like when you see a
Sure,
movie, what
just,
do you do?
right, the practicality of my job. Right.
So for a movie like this, that is the final film of a filmmaker,
Possibly.
possibly.
Probably.
Everyone around him has proclaimed this to probably be the case.
He's an older man, just to be, to get his age on the record. It's 82,
And it was
and he'll
quite,
be 83 in a couple weeks.
quite
so.
a challenge to get this movie finished.
Yes.
Yeah, he works methodically, slowly, however you want to put it. And
Yeah.
so that's only going to hurt him more if he wants to pump some shit out about, Thor fighting fucking Ms. Marvel or whatever
Which
Thor
is
5 will
finally
be
the
about.
time for Beta Ray Bill to show up in the Marvel Cinematic
Oh, yeah, that would be
Universe.
nice.
But
What's
as
the
a critic,
question?
how do you approach personal criticism of a film like this? Do you fold in all of the context and subtext and the career that builds up to this? Do you try to hold that in abeyance and keep this to be a singular object that you're looking at?
I'm obsessed with context. My reviews are loaded with it. It possibly could, I maybe should do less of it, but I am as anyone who listens to this podcast knows, I am mostly interested in what the filmmaker is trying to tell me about themselves and their, experience. I'm an auteurist, whatever you want to call me, right? I'm not like, it's amazing when I read my reviews back. I'm like, I'm not even mentioning performances I like because I'm so into
Mhm.
getting into what the artist is trying to say with this movie or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah. So no, I'm heavy. I haven't written my review for this movie yet.
Oh,
so.
wow.
Oh,
I
fascinating.
wrote a capsule for my TIFF coverage, but
Am I wrong in my assessment of like this movie primarily to me plays as a what am I leaving behind film, and through the prism of like also using that to explore like how did I get here, what did I think I was trying to do, what have I actually been,
Yeah.
what happens after me,
Well, so an interesting question that I'd like to pose that's sort of
Yeah.
related to that idea is how much do we think we should be listening to or believing artists when they tell us about their work?
Well, this is a
because
really
I think that's
interesting
I
question, JD.
I think that's a big question about Miyazaki as a whole
Yeah.
and filmmakers in general. And my opinion, to a certain extent, as someone who fancies themselves on the creator side of making stuff, is to a certain extent, creators are able to create their work through whatever process, mental, physical, whatever it takes them to make this thing. Their view of what that art object is that they created is limited by their own POV to it. And so
course.
oftentimes, I don't think artists are the be all end all
Right.
source of information about what a piece of art or an art object is, especially because oftentimes the artist themselves becomes an art object,
Yes.
which Miyazaki has in such a major way. He
Absolutely.
is a singular name that represents themes and ideas and all of this stuff. And we all know that cinema is not a singular process. Even the most auteur of auteurs, it is a collaborative process. And so
Absolutely.
but the fact that his films stand to be these are Miyazaki films, it means he becomes this art object. And so I think it's interesting because he also has very strong opinions about what his films are or aren't about, or what he knows or doesn't know about them. And one of the things I think is interesting is that I want to sort of talk about his personal history, because this is the first film that he has been like, I want to make a film about myself. At a certain point in the process, that was something that he was sort of saying. But he's also someone that very much says that his films are not about him processing his childhood or his own trauma. But what's so interesting to me is because when I look at his life and his history and the themes of his film, what I see is someone who is processing a lot of this stuff.
Of course.
So that begs the question of like, what do we take from artists when they tell us about their work?
I was talking to a friend of the podcast who I will not name for obvious reasons in a second, who works on the creative side of things in the industry. And we were talking about our love of like old DVD behind the scenes featurettes and documentaries, and especially the ones that are filmed during the filming of.
Yeah.
And he said, can I ask you a question? When did you realize that the people in those interviews aren't really telling the truth? And I said, the first time I did an interview like that.
Right.
And it's not to say that they're all lying all of the time, but there is that
finessing.
as film nerds, right? And especially now that we're in the dossier era of this podcast and we're going for so many primary quotes, right? Whether they're the quotes from, development, production, promotion, retrospective 20 years later, whatever, you're always seeing them through the prism of how that person is processing their own experience, which the movie doesn't really know what it is until an audience is engaging with it, right? And so much of press now happens long before anyone sees it, where that skews it. But also, yes, there's like elements of people's lives that they want to hold on to for themselves. Is Miyazaki lying to us, or is he lying to himself when he says the work is not autobiographical? Either way, it doesn't change it. You can't take it 100% as fact, even if,
Sure.
whether it's strategic or whether it's just the limitations of your own relationship to the thing you make.
He never worked at a mythical bathhouse, is what he means. Of course, he's in his art.
Well, and I asked,
But I think he's
what
also-
makes him think he has the right to tell that story?
I mean,
If he's
you're
never
right,
worked
it's
there.
disgusting.
It's disgusting.
But he never saw his parents become hogs.
Right.
This is true. But
So he wants to put words in the mouths of soot sprites when he has never been a soot sprite.
I don't know that they ever talk.
But here's a Miyazaki quote. He said,
Well, and that's actually really telling and damning.
Miyazaki said at one point, I do not believe that I'm the kind of person who is scarred and makes that the theme of my movies or the manga that I make.
But like he also, that's like what like Joe Biden would say or whatever, where like Joe Biden's like, no, oh my God, and I'm just like, you're this is your generation. You don't want to be like, now I'm talking about generations in this broad way, but like,
Yeah.
like
It's
a younger
true.
generation who's a little more like, this is about me and this is about something I went through,
Yeah,
or this
sure.
is about like the experience of my he's just like, yeah, shut up.
It's
Shut up. Draw the
unbecoming.
magic caterpillar.
Right.
It's
Right.
it'll make sense. Believe me. It's all in the soup.
Well, and I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
this stuff figured out. This stuff doesn't haunt me.
And I think there's an aspect of it too where Miyazaki wants the work to be the work.
Of course.
And I'm sure he knows. I mean, I'm not sure. I have no idea what Miyazaki thinks, but it feels like he is someone who has, based on all the stuff
I
that
thought
I've
of Biden just because they are almost exactly the same age, by the way. That's the only reason
Got
I
it,
thought
got
of
it.
them. Yeah.
having read a bunch of like, he's very acutely aware of, how life and art combine, and he has these really interesting ideas about that handshake between them. But I feel like him saying that kind of stuff also is him trying to keep the spotlight on the work.
Well, this
The way that he
Yeah,
wants to
right,
express himself
right.
is
He
through
doesn't
the
want
work.
it.
Because
And
he's not a salesman, but he is conscious of the way his work is being presented to the world, and he's trying to provide the context that he wants around it, which is he actually kind of abhors the commercialization. He wants the work to exist as its own pure thing. But yeah, you get into these questions of like, is that him strategically wanting to put the frame around the movie that he wants? Or Is this a guy who just like doesn't want to have the conversation with himself about this stuff? I'm not saying one's more interesting or the other. We will never know the answer. But this movie feels so like him just stripping everything out of his chest.
Well, this movie feels like the conversation,
Yes.
right? So, like a little bit of the background, which I think you've covered, I'm sure multiple times when you originally did this series, but to do a little refresher, is that the sort of like bullet points of Miyazaki's life were that he grew up and he in a pretty affluent situation. After the earthquake, his grandfather started a factory that makes airplane parts.
Mhm.
Rudders,
It was,
I believe.
I think it was engine bands for rudders and
Okay,
things like
fine.
whatever, something like that. His father and uncle then sort of take over management of this factory. The war happens, and they make a lot of money selling these airplane parts to the military as part of the war effort.
boom times for that.
Yes. And Miyazaki has a lot of conflicted feelings that he talks about in interviews about his upbringing because he grew up in very affluent. One of the things that is often referenced is that like his family had a car and gasoline to run the car, which is something that was not normal at the time. And also when I say affluent, I sort of mean that in relationship to the other
A
people
relative
around
sense, sure.
them at the time. And then when all of the bombings happened, his family left and I think went to his grandfather's estate, which is this sort of larger estate that had like a big garden that became the sort of inspiration theoretically for a lot of the sort of nature and stuff that popped up in his life. But there's a moment that he's brought up in interviews, and I think it's even in the documentary where he talks about
Kingdom of Dreams and Madness.
where they're driving away from the fire bombings
Mhm.
in a truck with his family, and another family stops in front of him and is like, "Please take us with you."
Right.
And it was like, it's funny because in this one book they're talking about how Miyazaki remembers it as a mom holding a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And Miyazaki's father just continues to drive.
Right.
And Miyazaki as a child has this like panic where he's like, I should have said something.
Right.
If I had said something, my dad would have stopped me. Surely we could have taken this family.
Right.
Miyazaki's brother contends, I don't think it was a family. I think it was like a guy or
Right.
like,
He's maybe
Yes.
like sort of morphed the memory over the years.
but he's
right?
brought this up in a degree that it clearly was
Wedged
impacting
in his
on
brain.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Right.
And then they're there, and then after the war's over, they return back to the city. Miyazaki's mother was sick. She had spinal tuberculosis for 9 years, and so she's in the hospital a lot.
A lot of this is obviously in Totoro and stuff like the sick
Yes.
mother. Yes.
Mhm.
And so these themes come up a ton in his movies, and because of
She
that,
lived, to be clear, she lived to a ripe old age.
Yes,
Like,
exactly,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
and then Miyazaki as a kid had this really deep love of airplanes and all this, the sort of mechanical stuff, but knowing that his family business was also supplying that for war efforts, this thing that he thought was abhorrent and awful. And he has a complicated relationship with his father, who was
Right. He's also growing up in the age where Japan completely demilitarizes, and like the idea of the war is so horrifying to the next generation.
right.
Yeah.
And there's the idea of his dad was part of the generation of like the like modern man and modern war, sort of like these people that were trying to sort of express different parts of themselves. And for Miyazaki, there's this huge conflict. I think there's a lot of cultural conflict between the traditional Japanese and modern Japanese that, and
Well, also
that comes out in his
This
work.
is in
The conflict-
all Japanese
Right.
cinema too.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
like
exactly.
post-war Japanese
But
cinema.
the key conflict in him of I look at this thing that my family builds as a form of art. I'm obsessed with the beauty and the engineering and the design of this thing, and it is made from a pure place. The excitement of the pursuit of perfecting this thing,
Right.
and then it goes out into the world and is used in a way that you cannot control.
Right. And that's the themes that pop up in so much of his films are
Yes.
this push and pull between the pursuit of beauty and the beauty of existence and how the allure of that beauty can cause such rift and trauma and conflict among people. And so what's interesting is that, The Wind Rises was a film that it felt like everyone was like, oh, this is him reckoning with some of that very literally.
Also felt like an elegiac movie about his legacy that he was, bidding us goodbye with.
Right.
It's also his most literal, grounded film, right?
Yeah,
And there's
set in
nothing
the
else that
real
comes
world.
Yeah.
close
Yeah.
to that in terms of just how.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
Not really. No. I mean,
But The
Kiki's
Wind
pretty
Rises,
realistic, but-
the big opening point was the earthquake.
yes.
Right. And for this movie, It's
fire
literally
Yeah.
what I just described.
Right.
It's the first thing in the movie.
The first thing in the movie is this element of his childhood.
Right.
So this is him telling the story. And so I think it's really fascinating too, because also comparing,
It's sort of him telling this.
I mean,
story.
it's not literally because there's,
his mom didn't die.
Yes.
And he wasn't then in the situation of like his dad marrying his mom's sister
Yes.
and being like, this is your new mom ish. Anyway, I gotta go. You know,
but
like,
it's,
you know,
what's,
which is
what I think
happens
is
in this
interesting though, is that first 2 minutes of the firebombings happening and then his family having to, like, all this stuff, that seems related to his childhood. And then everything that comes from that point forward feels like these semiotic expressions of all of the things that stemmed from that throughout his career, his life, everything. And there's also a really interesting context to the making of this film that we can sort of dive into also, of like how it all came to be. So
movie. I feel like this is good. Let's lay out context and then,
so
recap the plot. That's 5-10 minutes.
yeah, exactly. So one of the things that's interesting is that this film, after The Wind Rises, which was announced as probably going to be Miyazaki's final film, we all braced for that.
Which
we
was
saw
the third time he had called a movie his
Yes,
final
maybe
film,
fourth.
right?
He's been
Mononoke
doing
was
it
a
since
final
Mononoke.
film. Spirited Away was a final film. Or Howl was a final film.
how, yeah.
Yeah.
But
He's a
because of
liar,
the
okay?
because of the context of The Wind Rises, I think a lot of people tended to believe him this time because it was like a departure from a lot of what he had done. And it felt more,
It felt the most final filmy in terms of the actual meat of it versus the other films where it felt a little more like, I'm tired, I can't do this anymore.
yeah. And The Wind Rises ends with this theme that is like, you just have to live. Just go and live.
Right.
Yeah.
Literally. So being yelled at him.
Yes, exactly. And this film sort of starts from that point of life and then complicates that message because it almost feels like this is its own twist on that. But what's interesting, so this film is something that Miyazaki decides he wants to do.
Right.
Toshio Suzuki, Isa Takahata passed away, which was his longtime partner, creative partner, and
Sort of. Yeah.
mentor to a certain degree.
More kind of a pseudo mentor and then kind of like a parallel
Yes.
partner.
But was with him throughout his journey.
Certainly.
But also,
and
fair to say, the only other sort of like fully developed A-tier filmmaker within the Ghibli system,
Certainly.
which I think, I don't know. I mean,
in the early stages.
you and I
for sure.
disagree a little bit, maybe, and you obviously are coming to this with more proper context, but like the notion of, does Ghibli exist in any form after he's gone?
Yes, yes. Yes. In that context, yes. Takahata's films can stand separately
And it was a
in
proper
a very
body.
major way.
Yeah.
Yes. And, you know,
He has passed away though between Wind Rises and this film.
and Miyazaki was developing this film, and originally the film was a film that was considered, a lot of this is Toshio Suzuki talking about it. And
The
so,
producer of this film.
yes. And so who knows
David's
how much
voice
of it.
is quickly becoming full Super Dave Osborne.
That's you can't say that.
And so who knows how much of this is one person telling this story,
Sure.
you know what I mean? But originally developing this film was really about that friendship and about that mentorship. And then when he passed away, he was mourning that. And then he really took that uncle character out of the story.
Okay.
And obviously there's the book.
Granduncle, you mean?
Yes, granduncle.
Was maybe supposed to be more woven in throughout because he only appears basically in the last 30 minutes,
Yes.
20 minutes.
And then
Yeah.
apparently the heron became more of a character as the film was developed from that point forward. But the point being, Miyazaki says, I want to make this film. Suzuki, on the record, says that he almost didn't want to greenlight it because he was like, I don't know how this could be possible because
Sure.
Miyazaki is getting older at this point. His eyesight is going away. He's a lot more tired. It's harder to get him to do things. And Miyazaki's process up until then had been extremely, he had his hands involved in many steps of the process. So he would not only storyboard, but he would also do a lot of the key framing art.
Right.
So that's like all of the major motions within shots. And then he would go through and he'd do a lot of really rigid corrections on people's work after they had done their animation and sort of tried to interpret his work.
When he would try to allow himself to delegate things to other people, he would usually then be overcome with, I actually just need to do it myself and take this back, or at least redirect it.
Yeah, and he also had a reputation of being a very difficult to work with boss and manager.
Yeah.
He was known for yelling. He was known for working until midnight. And if you did not also work till midnight, that was against the culture of the office and what they did.
He's also just like an incredibly blunt man.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's the reason why so many of his interviews like linger around the internet, because you're just like, no one talks this directly. And you imagine if you're working for him and he just says like, this is bad, it lacks feeling
Yeah, exactly.
all the time, it starts to break your spirits.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's a lot of animators that worked together throughout the history of anime.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people that worked on Miyazaki's films and touched different parts of it. There's this one animator who's a very well-known animator, Toshiyuki Inoue, who has been an animator. He's not a director or anything like that. He's been like solely an animator. But his first job was on Kiki's Delivery Service, and he only took it because Miyazaki wasn't directing it. And then when he showed up to work, they're like, "Oh, Miyazaki's directing it," and he was like, "I wouldn't have taken this."
Right. Another thing that happened a couple times of like, this is a B project, someone else can make this. And then Miyazaki's like, actually, I'm doing
They're
Ponyo.
fucking it up. I'm taking over.
Right.
Yeah.
But Inoue is really interesting because he does a lot of interviews and talks a lot about the process of making the
More
film.
open.
Yes,
Sure.
exactly. And so he does these beautiful interviews where he's talking about the process of making this film. And what was so interesting was that this is the first film that like Miyazaki brought in someone to be the animation director, and really gave him heightened partnership in the filmmaking process. And that was Takeshi Honda.
Right.
And Takeshi Honda is a famous animator of his own right,
Yep.
known for probably most notably like the Neon Genesis Evangelion, sort of the work that he added to that, but has a very different style than Miyazaki. And because Miyazaki was getting to the point where he was older, he was not able to do the same level of extremely specific correction work.
Right.
And because of that, this film ended up being this really interesting collaboration between all of these animators that came back together again.
Right. To kind of be the web around him.
Yes. And so when you watch this film, what's really interesting, and Inoue does this great interview where he breaks down, oh, this is this person's scene. Oh, this is this person. Oh, this person did all of these things. And if you watch The Boy and the Heron, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't look exactly Miyazaki-esque. And that's because, number one, like Takeshi Honda has his own style that is very involved in this. And then also these animators who Miyazaki had worked with for years, you know, off and on, or that were just famous animators, came back for this film together. And because Miyazaki was at this stage where he could not work as quickly, oftentimes they just did their work on their own with very little correction.
Well, it's a more
From
extreme
Miyazaki.
version of like when elderly live action filmmakers are making a late period film and the insurance company demands that there is a backup director on set, and you have like Paul Thomas Anderson shadowing on Prairie Home Companion or Guillermo del Toro on Caine Mutiny Court Martial. But those guys are just like, this is fun for me that I get to watch them
They're
work.
not doing anything.
I assume I'm never going to have to do anything. People love to theorize about their contributions, but those guys are always like, I'm treating this as a free film school. He's clearly ready to take this movie on himself.
Right.
Whereas animation involves so many more tendrils, and this movie goes on for 7 years.
Yes.
That he really does start to have to, for the first time in his life, accept other people taking the torch on certain things.
But like what you're describing is the work of a director of an animated film.
Usually.
Like what happened on this movie is how it should
the normal
be.
process.
Exactly. Like it's totally obvious to delegate like a lot of that process.
Richard Williams is like the only other guy in history who worked
He's never stressed out.
like Miyazaki work, and Richard Williams like couldn't ever fucking finish
He
his
doesn't
stuff.
make movies that people can see because
Right.
they're never done.
Which you have to imagine when you talk about the nerves and greenlighting this film, that they're just like, this is Thief and the Cobbler. This is never going to get done.
But what's different, I would say, is that this is a fully hand-drawn 2D animated film, which we have very few of in the modern era.
in general. Well, the more in Japan.
Yes,
Yeah.
but in American animation, when you're referring to this is how animated films are made. Well, not as much anymore because so much is computer generated. But then also the hand-drawn animation, like stuff that is done now, is done with such a finite rubric of here's the exact character models, here's the exact how we do this, here's what this person looks like, and all the and because of how this process unfolded and Miyazaki's age and all that stuff, and how much he had to hand over to Honda to take over a lot of this stuff, and how much they just let animators do a thing. There are sections of this film that look and feel different than other sections of the film.
Sure.
It becomes
The
an
more I
interesting
rewatch it,
collage.
that will probably feel more obvious.
And
right.
the look of characters changes throughout the film. It's
Right.
like
Well,
really
the heron,
fascinating.
There's like a guy inside of him.
Yeah, exactly. One animator just put a guy
I
inside
don't
the
think
heron.
you're right about that. I've only seen it the one time.
Sometimes he's a bird. Sometimes like there's like a guy.
If that
inside.
happened in the movie, I would have noticed it. David,
yeah.
it's that time of the year.
What's up?
That time of the year that comes around several times a month.
We love it.
When Mubi sponsors the
Movie,
podcast.
movie. We like them. We like them. They're good. They're good.
David, we're happy to do any movie.
Yeah.
Ad read?
Sure.
It's always a pleasure.
Love
It's
those guys.
particularly exciting when Mubi has a new film they are distributing
Yes.
that we get to
They put things in theaters now that
Point
over at Movie.com.
our stinky little
Obviously.
fingers at.
You know, they are a streaming service that's curated, dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. But they
Passages,
also...
Decision to Leave, a lot of great movies we've covered.
Sure. Well,
And a movie that is one of my most anticipated movies of the year that you have seen and texted me almost immediately. This is a real Griff movie.
yeah.
This is a big time Griff
Grumpy.
movie. It just came out. I haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. I'm
Yes.
dying to.
It's Fallen Leaves, the
Aki
new
Kaurismäki's
film
new film.
from Finnish master Aki Kaurismäki. Made films like The Other Side of Hope and Le Havre and, A Man Without a Past.
Stalingrad Cowboys.
Yes, all those ones. We could put that on the bracket.
I think we did once.
No,
or
we didn't.
Okay.
What? Fallen Leaves is his new film. It's a timeless, hopeful, satisfying love story. It won the jury prize at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival. Okay, it's set in modern day Helsinki. It's about two lonely souls, Ansa and Holappa.
Leningrad Cowboys.
Yeah. I was okay. Look,
I had to catch myself on that.
yeah. You threw me there.
I'm sorry.
They have a chance meeting at a local karaoke bar, and then there's a bunch of hurdles. And this is going to sound like no big deal. Oh, lost phone numbers, mistaken addresses, a charming stray dog.
Mhm.
But he makes all of these little happenings uproariously funny in that great
yeah.
mordant Finnish way.
Is it fair to say he's one of those filmmakers who makes movies unlike anyone else on the planet?
Yes.
He has a tone, a look, a style,
himself?
a humor.
I think reflective of his country, but maybe
Yeah.
the best version
No,
of
but
their sense
yes,
of humor or
yes.
whatever.
It's
He doesn't
truly
really make bad movies. They are
Unique lens.
all
They're all good.
82 minutes long and
Yeah.
they all rule. But this, I do think, is a special one, even by his standards.
I'm so excited.
It's going to be on my top 10 of the year for sure. Fallen Leaves is now playing only in theaters. Visit Mubi.com/Fallen Leaves to see showtimes and get tickets. That's MUBI.com/Fallen Leaves. And also, of course, for a limited time, you can try Movie free for 30 days at Mubi.com/blank check. That's MUBI.com/blank check for a month of great cinema for free.
Yeah, Fallen Leaves isn't playing in a theater near you. It will be coming to
Mubi
movies
eventually.
soon.
This film ended up being an interesting collage of all these great animators who I
Yes.
think there's a funny element to it also. I don't know this to be true, but in some of the
Avengers Assembled situation.
in some of the interviews that I read, I think I get this energy. So this is me doing a little bit of fan casting right now, but I think this is there a little bit where Miyazaki does not trust that many people. He has a very high bar of accomplishment, and I think has to be sold on certain animators being allowed to work on his films.
Yeah.
And so I think he has this sort of this group of people that are like these young upstart animators that he's like, I trust this person. I can have this person come back. Those animators are all now in their 60s and
gonna say,
extremely accomplished,
You
famous
put young
animators.
upstart in air quotes.
Yes. They are extremely accomplished animators of their own right that have their own careers. But to Miyazaki, it sort of feels like that, these are the young guys that
kids.
come help me out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly true, but there's that energy that's there. And so a lot of these people came together. A lot of there's a handful of people that are part of the realist anime sort of generation. The people who did Akira and Jinra and all these movies that have a lot more realism and volumetric animation, whereas Miyazaki's work is so bubbly and round and expressive and doesn't do that. And so this film has a lot of elements that are not Miyazaki elements. They're Miyazaki stories and frames and storyboard moments, but then these animators take them and sort of express them in their own way. There's even what's the aunt's name? Yeah, Natsuko.
In the movie?
Yes.
Sorry? Yes.
She's one of the first characters ever in a Miyazaki film that was not designed by Miyazaki. That was a character designed by Takeshi Honda because they're all like, Miyazaki's not great at adult women.
What do you mean?
Like, and there are
Asuka with her giant boobs, which she always talks about. I'm trying to think of adult women, actually, because it's funny because he's the most iconic animator of young female characters.
yes,
Sure.
Like there's no animator who's better known for like his
Little
plucky
girls.
little girls,
Yes.
right? But there's not a lot of adult women.
in this one interview, they reference the female lead in Porco Rosso,
right?
which just like seems a little off. Something's a little off with that.
Well,
And
let's try to take an inventory, David. Who are the characters you have in posters on your wall, surrounded by?
Yeah, wait a second.
Paper
He
mache
designed the
hearts.
hottest woman in the world.
Yeah, wait. Actually, can you just show us your phone background? Okay, so yeah, there's Porco Rosso. There's Nausicaa.
No,
there's-
but Sosuke's mom is
Yeah.
is the number one woman in the world. So they're wrong.
But so they talk about how Takeshi Honda just basically was like, I'm going to do the whole character sheet for this character.
Uh-huh.
So I love that this film ends up being a pastiche because also,
Pastiche isn't the word. You mean like a patchwork?
yes, not a
Patchwork.
pastiche. It's the baton being handed off between different animators.
No, what you're saying is beautiful. That like whether by hook or by crook, like Miyazaki allowed a little more support and collaboration because of his age and because of
Support isn't even the word.
circumstances.
It sounds like he extended trust in a way he
Trust
had
is a
not
great way to put
really
it.
before.
Well, yeah.
Because
and-
when you even talk about the young, quote unquote, young upstart animators that he does trust, he trusts them to do the exact thing he wants rather than incubating their own development, if that makes sense, which is why most of them left and went off and did their own thing and didn't look back. For however much reverence they may have for him and his work, it's like, well, but I was functioning as a finger on his hand.
Right. Well, that's like the Takeshi Honda was going to do a new Evangelion thing and was like, all right, if Miyazaki calls, though, you have to answer the phone. You have to kind of do that.
Sure.
Another great example is Katsuya Kondo was the animation director on Ponyo. And I think he did a lot of the characters on Key's Delivery Service. I think he has a lot more of this sort of like light, expressive style to him. There are sequences that apparently in this film, Miyazaki just let him do it and like didn't do any corrections. And it was just like, yeah, that's fine. Let that go.
And he said, "Go off, King."
Yeah,
Which is crazy.
he's exactly.
You dropped this, and then he sent an emoji of a little guy with a crown.
And then, yeah, Kondo went into Miyazaki's office and Miyazaki was just head down in a dab.
He
And it-
solemnly took off his glasses, looked down, and said, "We have no choice but to stand."
Yep. That's everything that
But
happened.
I think that's really so. One of the things that I love in films, right?
I'm just actually picturing Miyazaki
Yeah.
in his green apron. just
Cigarette.
You know
dangling
that-
from his
just
mouth.
tapping.
You know that shot where they're doing the like interview in front of the Miyazaki Museum, and then he just sort of like workman-like walks through the background.
Yes.
What if it's just in the middle of like walking, he just stops and does a quick dab?
Flips a water bottle.
Yes. Anyways, there's no bits.
No bits. No bits. No bits.
But I will say the themes of this film are about legacy and passing down, and what can we pass down? What of our imperfections are permanent? What are the things that we hold on to? What are the things that we can resolve?
Mhm.
And what of those imperfect and perfect aspects of the world that we build can we hand down to the next generation? And I think what's so beautiful about this film is that the film is an art object that is that also.
Yes, it's right. Yeah.
These are all animators that came up either working for Takahata or Miyazaki or other great people that are sort of all sort of interconnected. And now he's at a point where he cannot physically do all of this stuff on his own. And so his only option is to pass the baton down to these animators and ask them to step in. And they are not going to do exactly what he did. It's going
And
to be
that's
different.
okay. The fucking shapes will be in a different arrangement.
And it might not be exactly what Miyazaki would have done if it was just him. And it might look different. The characters might change. There's a big thing about their noses are sort of different based on what animator is doing what they like. But that's part of the passing down of art, right? And looking at this film as this art object, I think there's something interesting about final films. Here's a question that I don't know the answer to that I'm curious if you guys can think of. What filmmakers do we have that got to make a final film?
Consciously?
Yes.
Like deliberately.
That it was announced that this is their final film, and it was.
Well, this is
And
the
completed.
whole. This is the whole Tarantino thing: is being like,
That's why
make your final film with intentionality, even if he's like capping it decades earlier than he would need to, so you don't end up with an accidental final film that is whatever, you know? It's a good question. Who actually called their shot and it was that? Because so many people unretire.
India is sort of a final film, I think. But I think even with stuff like that, where it's like David Lean was old and had been in
Sure.
retirement and then was
Right.
like, okay, I'm going to make this.
Right.
I don't know if he was actually like, this is it, bitch. The mic is dropped. You
Right.
know, like people don't usually do that because you'll end up like looking like Miyazaki, where you're like coming out of retirement and sort of embarrassed and like, yeah, I know I said I
Right.
wasn't going to do this anymore, but here I am. Like,
I
and
mean,
that's what's going to happen
Terrence
to one
Davies did that a
Quentin
couple times. Oh,
Tarantino.
it's absolutely going to happen. But Terrence Davies a couple times was like, I'm walking off the court.
But Terrence
right?
Davies was someone who had to push every movie uphill
course.
so hard that he's probably also in the press cycle like, I fucking can't do this anymore. You know?
Yes. No, there are a lot of those guys. I mean, Schrader's very much in that phase right now where he's like, look, between the state of the industry and my health, every time he's promoting a new movie,
Could
he's like,
be it.
maybe that was the last
But
one.
he's
and then he
also like,
can't
I'm
stop.
going to make another one if they
Right.
let me.
Right,
you
but
know?
rarely is it this thing where
No.
people go, they take their pause and they go, and this is going to be this final film.
And I'm designing it as my final statement to some degree,
Now, there are movies like A Prairie Home Companion,
which I think
where
is a
it's-
great final film.
Right. It's easy to read into that. Like, this is someone who probably knows
But
this
he
is
was
it.
actively prepping another film.
He sure was, because he's a grumpy little munchkin.
No, I mean, he,
I
before
was
that,
really
movie,
waiting to see what that last word
he's
was.
also a very tall man.
Little munchkin.
He was like your size.
All right, he's a tall man, but you cannot deny that there are parts of old Altman that are a little munchkin-like.
Munchkin isn't the word I would
David
use.
Sims, The Atlantic.
Yeah. Grumpy, certainly. No, but that was, he won his Lifetime Achievement Oscar, right?
talk like this, you know.
I don't think that's what he sounded like. You're still
In
sounding
my
like
head,
Schrader.
he's just like this little bridge troll, you know.
This is all Schrader stuff to me.
Well, fine.
He won his Lifetime Achievement Oscar. He gave this whole speech of like, I had a heart transplant 5 years ago. I've never disclosed it because I didn't want to be uninsurable. And that means I have another 20 years of directing left in me. In Prairie Home, he was like, here we go. I'm obviously in a late stage,
Right.
looking back, reflecting, thinking about death. But like, next movie, Hands on a Hard Body. He was supposed to make Hands on a Hard Body.
Right.
It was cast. It was prepped. He died. And so it's like, that's a great final statement movie, but he was rejecting that fully.
They usually do, because it's annoying.
Right.
But here's the thing that I will also posit is I think the idea of a final film or a final artwork is actually more of a romantic and
Yes.
philosophical
Yes.
idea than is it ever something that sees the light of day in real life. Because I also think that final works, I think people want them to be, the grand perfection of this person, the final message that we're going to be left.
Yes.
But I think actually final works, especially if they occur near end of life, are transitional.
Yes.
It's someone's career is not an essay that has a concluding sentence. It is a stream of human existence that transitions somewhere, and the final film is the last bullet point, the last data point of transition that we have. But it's not going to be the thing that summarizes the entirety of a career.
Right.
Ever.
Wind Rises was him attempting to do that. And then he wakes up the next morning after it's done and released and is like, fuck, I have new thoughts.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm not basing that on anything other than that's how human beings exist.
Right.
You know, and like, as you said, David, it's like, what else is this guy going to fucking do?
Well, look.
This guy can't stop expressing himself artistically as long as he has the means and the wherewithal to manifest it in any way.
I mean, first he made a little movie about a caterpillar, and then then
Right.
does this. I mean, I am in a phase in my life, which is, I think, kind of like one of the more tired phases that people
Yeah.
go through, where you have young children and you're just kind of like run ragged.
You seem full of beans today.
I am full of beans. And I had a burrito yesterday, I'll have you know.
Okay, so he's literally full of beans. And let's put that in the episode notes.
We should. That David's full of burrito beans. But you have that fantasy of like, what if someone came to me tomorrow and was like, you won't have to work another day in your life. Here's whatever. That's taken care of. You
Uh-huh.
Now you get to go retire. You know, you can garden and cook and
Sure.
you could experience great art and travel and, right? Would I like that? I'd probably take it being like, hell yeah. And then like 6 months in, am I like,
The fuck do you do?
okay, this has been fun, but now
Yeah.
I want to return to, creating or whatever it is I do it myself.
Yeah, and I
He's
think
got a
that's
beard. It's so crazy.
I was waiting for you to
Well,
acknowledge.
you came in late. I already
Came in a
acknowledged it off
couple
mic.
minutes late.
Well, it was, that's neither here nor there. JD has a beard. It's just different.
I mean, I've known you for
Not
like
bad.
almost 15 years now,
Yeah.
perhaps.
I've known you for 10.
And you
bro.
walked into the Angelica yesterday, and I was shocked. I've never even seen a hint of a beard before. I mean, talk about transitional stages and big statements from major artists.
I was about.
JD Amato has started a new era.
I'm on a local competitive running team, the Hellgate Roadrunners, and one of my teammates, Andrew Gorman, accused me of being a coward for never attempting to grow a beard. And I said that I don't think I could grow a beard, and he said, "You can. You're just a coward." And so then I have attempted to grow a beard, and
Succeeded.
It
yeah,
worked.
I think
You won.
I think
You
he was
won.
right. I was a coward.
I think a lot of people who say they can't grow a beard are, right, more just like, well,
Weak. They're weak.
it's more a thing of like,
Of
well, I
spirit
don't
and
like
mind.
those first 2 weeks where it
Sure.
looks
It's
shitty.
bad. And
it's
it
like
looks
if you
bad
give
and it
any
feels
beard
bad.
growing
Yeah.
enough, it does feel kind of bad.
It feels
That's the problem.
terrible.
Yeah.
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 All right, The Boy and the Heron. So it's about a boy,
Can't
but
grow a
it's
beard.
not Chris Weitz is about a boy.
It's not about a boy. And Paul co-directed that one. Let's
He
give
did.
credit where
You're
credit
so sorry.
is due.
But is there any more context you want to get into before we discuss the plot of the film?
The one thing that I'll say that I think is interesting,
Obviously, it's also inspired by a book called How Do You Live?
yes, which was the original working title.
And people
It's the Japanese title.
assumed it was going to be more of a direct adaptation. That title.
Those fools.
Sure.
Because every adaptation he's ever done, I mean, Howl's is like maybe the most faithful adaptation
And
of
that's-
the work he's done, and it's still
Yeah.
obviously a
Yeah.
departure. And then there's stuff like Wind Rises, where he's like, it's sort of inspired by this book, but it's also about this real guy. But the events happening to this real guy happened to another guy in this book. And
Right.
you're like, what? Ponyo, he's like, I call the character Sosuke after this book, The Gate, which is this like masterpiece of Japanese literature.
Yeah.
I read The Gate. It's about this couple who are like can't have kids. It has nothing to do with Ponyo, except they like
Ponyo
live on a
also
hill.
Started as Little Mermaid, right?
Well, Ponyo has a lot of Little Mermaid.
Right.
In it.
The
It also
couple
has,
in
like
that book-
Wagner in it. Like
Yeah.
it's got all kinds of weird shit.
The couple in
in
that book love ham.
it. They do.
They do love him.
It's just I read this book, knowing obviously that it would not be about a little
Yeah,
boy and a little girl who loves ham, but like where I was like, it's this like stunning, quiet book about this couple who can't have kids. And then later you realize like, oh, this relationship was the product of affairs
Yeah.
and they feel guilty. It's like written in 1900.
hmm
And it's just so funny to think of Miyazaki being like, I shall call this 6-year-old in short pants Sosuke after that book of, no
Yeah.
relation. Anyway.
No, I was reading that the sales of How Do You Live have gone like through the roof in
Sure,
Japan.
right. Because
Because people are like looking for clues or understanding, but the book itself is an element of the film,
Right.
and that the lead character has the book.
Did you
Yes.
read this book?
I did not read that book.
You read a
Um,
lot of books. I don't know.
I also watched Future Boy Conan.
Oh, sure.
This first
Yeah.
time
Which
I
you'd
saw
never
Future
seen
Boy
before.
Conan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
It finally was because it was unavailable here for a while, right?
I
Sure.
believe it still is, but I
Okay.
There's
got it
ways to get
through other
anything.
means.
What?
I thought G Kids maybe either
Maybe.
announced they're about to release it or just did release it.
I had someone offer it to me and I accepted. And the way that I saw it did not have any English around it. So I did not understand
But you
fully
were
the words that they were
vibing with
saying. But is a show that you don't necessarily need the words to fully understand what's going on.
And
I don't know.
Is Andy Richter in it?
Yes,
I
in
will
the year 2000. That's
Yes.
why they call it Future Boy Conan.
I will say after we
Obama
watched
is in it.
The Boy and the Heron, I went home and I re-put
bits.
on
No
the
bits.
pilot or like the first episode, and I
Oh wow.
cried again
Mhm.
because it is watching this film and then
The
seeing
beginning and the
where
end of his career.
he
Yeah.
came from, and it felt like like in like Toy Story 2 when they watch like the Woody's Roundup TV show or whatever,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh,
This is who I
the
want.
joy and simplicity of where it all began, and like
Yeah.
now where he is as this older. It
Can I
was
just
really
say it?
Yeah.
Woody's Roundup looks like it sucks.
That's so fucking wrong.
Having been made to watch Toy Story 2 so many times
He's
recently.
trying to start another dumb animation nerd. He was angry that this
Don't
episode
put me on Team
Woody's
Griffin on this
Roundup.
one.
had gone
I don't
so
know. I
far
might be on
without-
Team David for this one.
some guy named Will Vin. Well, Woody's Roundup looks like a great fucking show.
Critters.
Yeah, the critters.
Prospector.
He
Stinky
puts his
Prospector.
butt on the dynamite to try to
That part's pretty funny.
blow it out. I don't know if I'm putting too much weight on this in the context of
Sure.
the thing, but especially with you talking about his
Ben and
What?
I just laughing at you saying that. That's 9 years of
Okay.
working with Griffin.
okay.
What are you putting too much weight on?
No, you're talking a lot about the quote unquote the younger generation of animators who came back for this movie, right? Who were sort of the children of Miyazaki, but all left and went off and did their own thing.
A lot of them continued working on
And
Miyazaki films.
Hardly
Yeah.
young people at this point, to be
They're all in
to be
their
clear.
60s.
Yeah, they're
put in
all
quotes. I
old,
put in
right.
air
Yeah,
quotes.
yeah.
I put in air quotes.
Well, you can't hear air quotes.
I said the quote. I said the quote.
Mhm.
The Goro of it, I do think, is interesting in this movie, and him sort of reckoning with what is the thing I've built and what happens to it when I'm gone.
Yeah.
Because Goro is the one who has stayed, and whereas these other guys, even when they have come back and worked on Miyazaki, what am I taking something that you want to get to?
No, I want to do a bit, but I'm not going to do it.
You said no bit.
We're not
No
doing
bits
it. We're not
episode.
doing
Okay.
it. We're not doing it.
That those guys found new means of expression.
Yeah.
And am I wrong in thinking that the sort of narrative around Goro is like he is trying very hard to uphold the legacy, and it is not quite hitting?
Yes.
This movie has a
Well-
fail son in it too, sort of. I don't know.
Who would you consider the fail son in this
The
movie?
dad, kind of.
Oh, sure.
And like, I watched it, and you can't not think about Goro Miyazaki for a second. And usually, I just kind of put it aside
This
because
is
I'm
why
like,
I'm bringing it
it's
up.
too simple,
Yes.
and I shouldn't, read into this relationship. But it is true that Goro Miyazaki exists, bears the Miyazaki family name, directs animated films, and they are all mediocre.
Yes.
I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if his father agrees, but every time you read about his father's opinions on his son's movies, he's always like, he worked hard. I can tell.
Yes.
You know,
And-
it's always
and
like this sort of like very vague statement.
But he's trying so hard to be like, I can crack what a Ghibli movie is,
Right.
versus these guys who are like, maybe I'm taking what I learned from working there and expressing this in a different way, my own prism at a different place, whatever it is. I do think it's like similar to the Pixar problem that has really come to the surface of like Lasseter built a dream team of all his fucking CalArts compatriots and lured them all over to him and then never established a next generation below him.
Right.
a
and-
classic thing that
Totally.
yeah.
And Lasseter, on top of that, started getting aggressively bad at making films himself
And
in a
aggressively
way,
good at hugging.
great at hugging, incredible at hugging, but in a way that Miyazaki didn't, where it's like his eyes off the ball entirely. And Pixar exists in this weird state where they're like, we're now trying to do the work that needed to be done 20 years ago and finding the Domishis and finally giving them a boost rather than like years of them losing directors because they're like, they're never going to let me make what I want my way here. I have to go off and do something somewhere else.
But I think that's an aspect that this film is addressing.
Totally. That's why I'm
I-
bringing this up.
I
Right.
think it is a very
The building of the tower is when I got really locked into like,
right. But I think there is this belief that everything needs to be passed down, remain the same. Studio Ghibli needs to remain the same. Who's
Yes.
going to take over that mantle? And I think the answer that this film, both in how it is made
Yes.
and what the film is saying, is that you don't need to hand down the exact replica. You add but a small
Yes.
piece to the thing, and then that goes off. And so all these animators that worked with Miyazaki through the years, they've all gone on to make other films and other stuff. That's the next
Yeah,
generation.
yes.
You don't need someone to just
Doesn't need the
step
Ghibli
into
logo in
Ghibli
front
Right.
of it. Right.
and that's why I think also it's interesting because people also often try to, I don't know, people have the dumb comparison where they're like, oh, Ghibli's like, it's the Disney of Japan. It's like, it's not. It's not because
No,
Disney
is a multi, armed like conglomerate that has tendrils in every part of life, and
Yeah.
Ghibli's not like that at all. Yeah.
But here's something I found very interesting. And I don't know if I just missed that this has been in previous films and I hadn't caught it, but it felt new to me.
Mhm.
In the end credits, there is a full block of merchandising development team. There is a block of the park, the
Yeah,
Ghibli
right.
park
Well, they've
team.
got the Ghibli Park now, but they've always had merch, or at least for a long time.
But that
Yeah.
it's not usually a thing I think that gets credited in the film. I'm not saying it's unusual that they have
Yeah.
merchandising. It felt like a more explicit acknowledgement. And even the streaming thing, I remember talking to the guy who runs G Kids in 2019 when we were doing the series. And he was like, they will never be streaming.
Right.
He likes the sanctity of it needing to be a deliberate choice and engagement with a screening at when they do the Ghibli Fest every year or buying the one disc or whatever it is. And then a year later, they announced HBO Max is getting all the Ghibli movies.
Right.
And they're also creating these sound and image scapes and all this sort of stuff. And all of this was just like, you know what, Miyazaki, if you're going to finish this movie, you have to make some concessions because project is going slowly,
Yeah.
getting more and more expensive. We're not getting money in from other areas. This is the only thing we're all working on. We need to open the doors a little bit. And there's this like chunk in the credits of acknowledging tendrils of the company that are not direct expressions of this movie, but are the things that allowed this movie to stay in production for 7 years.
But that's nothing like Disney.
I'm not saying it is.
Right. Yeah.
You're having an argument with a Disney guy.
Who what?
You are having an argument with a Disney guy. That was not
Scrappy
the
the
point I
cat.
was making. Scrappy the cat. You're arguing with Scrappy the cat.
Well, sure, but I'm addressing the point you made.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Disney's a company that makes like $90 billion a year.
Yes.
That's a lot of money.
And they
Like
They are not-
Ghibli is not a company that makes $1 billion a year.
No.
Like, yeah, it is a small concern, but
and despite
yeah.
the name, it is not a company that is about one creator, Disney. Right?
Right.
It
Well,
just isn't
is.
that.
Well, Walt's still there. He just got to go deep. You know,
This is the point I'm trying to make, is that Disney is like, we find a way to monetize every element of what we do, right? And to pump it out in all quarters. And Ghibli's thing has always been, we strategically, with a tremendous amount of control, make the deals and the expansions that allow us to continue making our movies. We don't need growth quarter over quarter. We don't need to outdo ourselves. It's just enough to keep the lights on and maintain the same size. And the last 7 years have been them accepting more of
inching
that,
out a little bit,
which doesn't
right.
feel like them trying to like take over the world or
They get a lot of shit for it. People have criticized the park, especially.
but
Is
it's
there,
all
like-
truly, this movie doesn't get finished if they don't do it. It finally
But
got
people
to
are
this
still
point.
like, you have this environmental message that runs through your movies. Like, why are you building a fucking theme park? Like, that's so
But
contrary.
also,
to
everyone who's been to the theme park is like, it's really a park. It's not that much of a theme park. It's philosophically so different than what we think of.
and I'd love to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
also think
Patreon.
there's a I don't know Miyazaki's actual opinion on this. He might have spoken to it on an interview somewhere. I don't remember what it exactly is, but I would not be shocked if he is not concerned about the legacy of Ghibli after he goes.
This is what
He's
I'm talking
definitely
about.
not. He's spoken on this extensively.
Yeah.
In that he's just like, it doesn't matter.
All of this
Ghibli's
is
just a dumb name.
what do I
thought
need
of.
to do to get
Yeah.
this movie done?
Here's a
Right.
But also, maybe this thing doesn't need to exist past me.
there's a fun anecdote from when I was in
Let's
college.
find the quote.
I went to film school and I minored in computer science.
Humble brag. Jesus Christ. We get it. You minored in computer. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. David coming.
Go on. No, go on. Sorry.
So I minored in
David
computer
hates
science.
computer scientists.
Computers.
David's
It's not a science. It's an
anti-computer
art.
David never has a laptop in front of him when recording.
and is actively scrolling and typing something.
I'm trying to find this Miyazaki quote.
Okay.
I know it's in my Tumblr, so I have to load my Tumblr.
You still have a Tumblr?
I mean, it exists. Like, it hasn't been updated since
Do
2015.
you want
Maybe
to
now's the time.
promote it?
You want to promote the Tumblr?
DavidSims.tumblr.com.
Wow.
No L?
No L, which means I really must have made it a long time ago.
no.
No L?
Of course,
no
it is, of
bits.
course,
No
a
bits.
Back on track.
Christmas-themed Tumblr.
Okay.
So when I was in college, because I spanned those two departments,
Mhm.
NYU connected me. MoMA had reached out to NYU and said, "Oh, we need help. We have a whole digital art wing of MoMA,
Mhm.
but our and this was back in the 20 aughts. What do you call
The
that?
aughts.
Yeah. They're like,
Double-
we don't really
double
have, our preservation department is not robust yet in
Mhm.
terms of our digital artwork. And so they wanted students to come in and to be the go-between between artists and MoMA to figure out how to take any of their work that used computer programming or digital stuff to figure out a preservation strategy to hold on to this for years.
Uh-huh.
And one of the first things they told us when they sat us down is they were like, first things first, when you talk to the artist will tell you that one of the things they think is beautiful about this work of art is that it will one day fall apart and cease to work.
Uh-huh.
That is wonderful for them, the artist. We have just spent $200,000 on this work of art.
We are a museum.
We do not share that opinion.
Yeah.
So no matter how much the artist tells you
Right.
that this thing falling apart and dying at a certain point is beautiful and wonderful, that is not your job.
Right.
And I think about that a lot because almost everyone that I know, as you know, working professionally in this industry as a writer and director and all this stuff, like I do like to move forward. And when I move on from something, I'm like, yes, if that disappeared, that's okay, not from the universe, but like I want to continue moving forward. And the fact that these things have lifespans is interesting to me. So with something like Miyazaki, there is sometimes this feeling that people are like, oh, what's the legacy going to be? How does this continue to go? And the answer is, it doesn't.
Who gives a shit?
Can I read you the quote?
Someone has a career arc.
Yeah.
And that is it. That's the lifespan.
I believe this is from Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, but I'm not. It's from one of the documentaries about him. Someone asks him, aren't you worried about the studio's future? And he says, this is translated, future's clear. It's going to fall apart. I can already see it. What's the use worrying? It's inevitable. Puts on sunglasses. Ghibli is just a random name I got from an airplane. It's only a name. Then he looks out at some trees and says, how pretty. I mean, it's classic Miyazaki.
I mean,
obviously.
And it's also, what's so beautiful about that is it's everything we said, where it's like, it's both, that's how he feels, but then I'm also like, but I also don't believe him.
It's a
And
little bit of an
like,
act or a
But also,
persona that
this
he has
movie's metaphor
when talking,
is
right.
the world's worst Jenga tower that includes
the world.
spheres,
Yeah,
like
it's got
objects
some-
that you
it's-
cannot stack upon.
It's non-Euclidean.
And this kid keeps on pushing back on like, not even, you're giving me pieces that are fucking bullshit.
right. You basically gave me like a
You gave me
misfit.
cursed pieces.
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the actual,
yeah.
it's like, these are cursed. These are from tombs.
Yes.
Man, this movie.
And
is
you're just
wild.
like, maybe this just needs to topple over. It's actually kind of unhealthy that it has stayed up this long.
So that's a long way of saying the last piece of context before we talk about actually getting to the plot of it.
Mhm.
When asked, Miyazaki was like, I don't really even know what every aspect of this film is about,
Good
which I think is the best type of
right.
art.
Correct.
When the artist
totally.
is like, I don't know, but I'm being summoned to create these images. I'm summoned to tell this story. I cannot tell you what it exactly means. Here is what it is.
It's no good if they can tell you exactly what it means anyway, right?
Yes.
You want a
Also,
little bit of mystery.
Beyond
in there.
that, when I mean, talking about like people lying in interviews, you know, strategically, sometimes it's just like, I don't want to feed it to people. The
Right.
thing is not functioning properly if I'm preloading into people's heads how they need to process
There
it.
are artists who are like, look, it's there if you want to
Sure.
figure it out. But they're right. Aren't too many artists who are like, let me tell you what I was trying to do. Now it happens.
I would disagree. I think there are today too many artists
Maybe
who
there
try
are
to
too
do
many.
that.
Maybe there's too much of that going on.
Well,
right
it's
now.
what
You might
drives
be
me nuts about the like Kubrick stuff, where it's like, actually, the carpet means that
He's
it's a
yelling
symbol
at
for,
us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, these
right.
like
He doesn't build movies that way.
yes, and that's the whole purpose of semiotics, right? Is this stuff gets baked into
Right.
us as creators, and it comes out in ways that we don't even know.
And it does have meaning, but that meaning doesn't only exist if there is an intentionality and a didactic
Yes.
point that is trying to be made through those elements.
Can I say before we talk about The Boy and the Heron?
Yeah.
Just one other
Our
thing.
15th time saying we're about to start talking about it.
My daughter is watching more and more stuff as she
Humble brag.
grows. And she's gotten obsessed with 2 Pixar shorts. One is Bao.
Mhm.
To my utter surprise, she over and over again wants to watch this story of
He's a little food baby.
Yeah,
a little food baby, but also, of course, an immigrant parent dealing with her son growing up and changing and marrying a white woman. And also about her consuming her food baby like, fucking Neptune or whoever, from mythology. And my daughter just watches it and is like loving it. She also likes Jack Attack. We talked about this.
Right.
She also loves La Luna,
Oh, interesting.
the one by the guy who then does Luca,
Yeah.
which she calls Moon and Stars.
Mm.
Anyway, you mentioned Domishi a while back.
Yeah.
20 minutes ago. Boy and the Heron is the movie we should talk about, though. Right?
yes,
1943. Right?
yes. What a time! The war is afoot.
World War II.
is happening.
Yes.
There are fire bombings happening in Japan, and our film opens with 12-year-old Mahito experiencing a firebombing in his hometown.
Tokyo.
And right away, his father announces that his mother's hospital is on fire.
Yes.
And the
he's
first,
running into the fire, and the fire like overwhelming the frame.
and the father runs out. And then I think there's a really beautiful moment where we see Mahito want to run off and then return. And then we watch him as he changes clothes.
Yeah.
And then he runs out. And by that point, it's all a fire universe that he enters into.
It's very overwhelming, especially given that, like you, I'm watching this movie with barely any understanding of what the movie is going to be.
Yeah.
And it's this very jarring, upsetting beginning that does kind of feel like unlike other Miyazaki movies.
Yeah,
They
and
do not
there's-
usually have beginnings this sort of visceral.
And there's a freneticism too,
Yes.
and a specificity to the images that feels very both Miyazaki, but also there's an edge to it that is not totally Miyazaki.
Mhm.
That feels more like other anime. Like it's very interesting right off the top.
The fire itself feels very Akira, and I forget the term you used of just the move towards realism that
Yeah.
happened in the 80s, but just like there is an intensity there that feels more realistic than the sort of expressionistic thing he usually does.
Yeah. And then the film jumps to a year later.
Yes. It's a year later. His father has remarried his wife's younger sister.
Yes, which it takes in very
little
classic
minute to figure that out,
Miyazaki
right.
sort of
Mhm.
form. You sort of glean through words that that's what's happening. And you're like, wait, that's his mom's sister.
Yeah, kind of
Mhm.
old-fashioned biblical notion of right. Like if you lose this person, you can marry someone else
Or
in the
classic
family.
Bogdanovich notion.
Yeah, and I think what
P- Peter B. He pulled that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Right.
what-
Of course he did. Yeah.
it's like the Bible. I don't know why my Peter Bogdanovich impression is Lauren Michaels. Go on.
there's a really visceral moment to me very early in the film that like I cued into, which is obviously we know the idea of Ma, the moment between moments that Miyazaki talks about a lot. These spaces between moments are what defines a Miyazaki film to me
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. And there's one early on here where we're introduced to the new home that he's going to be in once his family has fled to more towards the countryside. And he enters the home and then he goes into a bed and it's like his new bed. And he has a moment where he just sits in the bed and then just topples over to the side and just closes his eyes and is just laying there in this sort of like prone, uncomfortable position.
Mm.
And it's like, to me, such a visceral moment of grief, that grief being this thing that comes in these waves. And I know those moments well where you're just, and I remember watching the film and think about this. He's laying on this like patterned blanket. And I'm like, I know that feeling so well of going through something that is traumatic and being somewhere new and being like, this isn't mine.
Right.
Mhm.
This pattern is meant to amuse and it's not mine. It's not for me, but it's trying to comfort me in this moment. And right now I'm just going to lay my head down. Even all of this is so foreign. None of this is mine, but in this moment, this is where I have to rest and where I have to find comfort in this thing that is so foreign to me. And it's like this really beautiful moment that, again, I feel like other filmmakers might focus on the big feelings of all of that.
Sure.
And Miyazaki is like, no, it's these moments between like him putting on the clothes to go help his dad put out the fire at the hospital. It's like, that's a moment that as a kid you would think back on and go, oh, but maybe if I had already been in the right clothes, maybe I could have gotten there
Right.
and done something. And it's like, you get locked into these moments that are so specific and small. And I think,
even just you had the thing with him in the car, seeing the family.
Yeah.
And like living with that. If I had said something, there was a split second of a decision you never stop reliving, even though it is fixed. And you can never know if the outcome would have changed.
and it's all in your own head.
Yeah.
It's all,
Yes, exactly.
because that's not
Yeah.
how life works. Time
No.
just keeps going,
Yeah.
which is part of the theme of what the movie goes on to tell you. And what's interesting is I think there's a lot of talk about how Miyazaki storyboarded this straight ahead, right? So just like
Mhm.
chronologically. And so the first chunk of the film has more Miyazaki influence. He was more actively involved because once he completed that, he went back and started, all right, I'm going to go correct the animation. I'm going to go draw some keyframes and dive in there. And
And,
And
that's when they're like, Jesus Christ, like this will never be done. Right.
yes,
Yeah.
there's talk about how in the past it had been 10 minutes of film per month.
Right.
And this current process, they were producing 1 minute of film per month.
Because I think this movie was originally announced in 2017 for a 2020 release,
Mhm.
Yeah.
timed to
The
the
Olympics,
Olympics that
yeah.
didn't end up happening that year. And in 2020, they announced it is like 30% done.
Yeah.
In the year that most people thought it would be finished. And the last 3 years since then have been very touch and go.
Yeah.
And they weren't really communicating. I mean, especially with them not revealing information about the movie in terms of the marketing. They also were being very cagey about the timeline of it progressing.
Well, it was one of the first things where they said, there's no timeline.
Right.
We're just going to let this film move ahead at whatever pace it needs to move ahead. And apparently, the work from home stuff with COVID actually helped them because animators could go work independently.
Interesting. Without him hovering over their shoulders.
Well, because it's just
Whirling
not
around.
possible. So then we're introduced to very soon after what
The audience, my audience, really, you could feel the relief coming through them when the four little ladies show up. They're like, okay,
We're in-
This
here's
is,
the language.
this
isn't
is
it like
normal?
8 of them at the beginning?
Sure.
Or is it always
There are
4?
4 maids like credited in the cast. I mean, there's a bunch of them.
God, can I tell you that when they came on screen, my first instinct, I had 2 things that they reminded me of.
Mhm.
Number 1, the Cenobites, and number 2, the killer comes from outer space. In the sense that it was like, oh, there's like the short round one. There was like the tall one with the weird long face. And
Butterball,
yeah,
Chatterer,
exactly. And I was
CD.
like, and they move in this sort of,
All of our friends.
yes, they move in this like undulating form.
You should start
they-
Ben's social groups.
And it's great because you're like, here it is. Not only are we getting like a group of people, a Miyazaki
Right.
thing, but we're also getting Miyazaki's depiction of the elderly, which is like always such a joy to behold.
And he
Yeah.
loves a sort of collection of crones with like
Yes.
humor and, delight and all this. I don't know.
But also a collection. He loves like a character
A
that is a
motley-
grouping of,
Yeah,
Yes.
be they verbal or not, be they sort of group mindy or independent. But like, I mean, this movie has like 4 different masses
Yes.
in a way,
I think it's got like 6 because there's
The parakeets, they're the sort of the creatures that look like the Doctor Who adipose.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little souls. Yeah.
They're the maids.
yeah,
Who are the other ones?
the frogs become a
Oh, sure.
mass, the
Yes.
herons become a mass, the
Yes.
pelicans become a mass.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's-
right. I
that's
guess
a lot
there's
of-
4 different types of birds.
A lot of right. Yeah.
I will say
Yeah.
my favorite character in this film, I'm just going to say it right now.
Mm.
Best character in the film is there's a shot where we first see the old women walking and they pass by a little staircase and there's a little old man sitting on the
Yeah.
stairs. He doesn't move. You're like, oh, that's just a background thing. And at the last second, he just does one little tiny
Yeah,
he
yes.
does a little tiny wave. And then we never see that man again. Because I don't think it's even the older guy that teaches him.
I was about to say, is it not that guy?
I don't think it is. Maybe it is.
I
but
have
I'm
the
like,
movie right here. I'm now going to watch. it.
Wow.
Wait, you have the movie?
Screener
I'm an
light.
awards voter.
Oh my God, he's a critic.
JD, he's an awards voter. I don't know if you forgot about
Yeah,
that.
critics
will-
don't get shit. Yeah, but awards voters. Oh, excuse me. Do you want a Naiad water bottle? Please take my water bottle.
Yeah, listen, I could tell you about the
I heard that Naiad water bottle, by the way, was lying about how much water it can contain. Go on, JD. Sorry, I had to make that joke.
what's it called? What's the Rachel
I got David.
the TV show Catskills comedian New York
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Marvis? I don't know if this. It's a brief aside.
Yeah.
As a
And just what we need right now is a marvelous Mrs. Maisel aside.
Yeah.
as a current Emmy voter
Yes.
and a WGA voter, I get a lot of screeners and things like that.
Mhm.
For years, the Marvelous Miss Maisel would send like somehow a full-on like package, like a parcel,
Yeah.
to every voter,
Yeah,
every
They
person.
would basically send like an Upper West Side apartment. Like some of these fucking studios, the money they spend is it's sickening.
Yeah.
You
Like,
would
it's
open-
truly awful.
You would open the box and it was Santa Claus technology because more
Right.
stuff would come out of it than
Right.
could possibly
Right.
be
You're like,
inside
this-
of it.
How could this work?
Well,
Yes.
to this day, I still have Marvelous Miss Maisel poker chips on my desk that I'm like, these are too nice to throw away, but there's no context that I could
We
ever
want you
use
to
these.
think of Margaret every time you play poker.
I mean, the wildest one of all time was when the Fox/Disney sent out the giant box of food to all the critics and voters for Nomadland. And they were like, here, it's the thing she doesn't have in the movie.
Right.
Oh my
They
God.
should have sent a bucket to poop in. That would have
we
been
got
good.
you fresh produce from our
Wild.
partner at like Whole Foods.
Like, I
will
like it
also
when they
s-
lean in. you
I'll
know,
also
like,
say
yeah.
I've never gotten one of those and been like, oh, I got to vote for Miss Maisel.
That's the ultimate truth of this is you might be like, wow, I still drink out of my Naiad bottle, but
Yeah.
not like, and that's why Jodie Foster was the winner of best. It's like, no, why would you ever do that? Whatever. Okay.
Okay, back to Boy and the Heron. Sorry,
All
that was a
right,
brief
so-
aside.
I
I did hear that G Kids is sending out herons to all voting members, though.
yes,
Yes.
but it's scary.
Yeah.
And they say like pretentious things. Like, yeah.
No, they're sending out a heron costume so you can be
That
the little weirdo
that would
man.
actually-
that would
cool.
actually
good.
Yeah.
The
I
heron
want
hoodie.
that.
Will you go on the record and say that if they send you one, David, you will vote for the Boy and the Heron?
We already did. It was one best animated feature in the New York Film
No,
Critics
David,
Circle.
that's smart. Actually, establish a timeline
Yeah,
on
good,
this
smart.
episode that people don't know that we're recording this in August.
So that when you finally do bang your giant gavel in your barrister's wig and
That's smart.
decree.
I have said I'm going to be the chair of the Critics Circle probably at some point because I'm the vice chair right now.
Oh,
people are
wow.
going to sit on you.
I have said I want a gavel. I want a gavel because we don't have one, and I'm like, I need a gavel.
What
I
you
would
need, I'm a big Survivor head. You need a torch.
like- or an immunity idol, maybe.
Yeah.
Every
It would be funny if like, it's
every
like
mo-
Naiad has the immunity idol, so actually it's going to win.
every movie gets a torch, and you snuff the ones that don't win.
Yeah.
It would be a lot of torches.
Would you, if they gave you a gavel on the condition that you wore the barrister wig, would you accept?
Yes.
Okay.
No bits back.
So while he's at this home, yes, there are these 4 lovely crones tooling around, but there's also a mysterious gray heron.
Yes.
That is chilling.
It's a little
Out.
aggressive. I wouldn't say chilling. I'd say the heron's got aggressive vibes
He
from the
gets it.
beginning.
And there is also, of course, a giant ruined castle that's on the grounds where they're like, yeah, avoid that.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, don't go over there.
Also, have you heard the thing that Toshio Suzuki has said about the characters in the film?
What do you mean? I don't know.
Miyazaki is the boy.
Okay.
He is the heron.
Suzuki is the heron.
Suzuki says that this is what the film was about. That Miyazaki is the boy. That
So
he's-
after we talked all about how you don't really want to lay it out, Suzuki was like, well, here's my reading. He's the boy. I'm the
Yeah,
heron.
but he's just
and then
offering his
Takahata
read.
Takahata is the grand uncle.
is the grand uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting. Because
And-
obviously the easiest way to watch this movie is you're like, Miyazaki is the grand uncle. This is about his legacy, about blah, blah, blah. But Miyazaki's probably like, what, that guy? That guy's fucking old. I'm not that guy. I'm the boy.
Yeah.
I'm full of vim and vigor.
And what's apparently interesting is that apparently Suzuki had to, because Miyazaki was having trouble writing the grand uncle because of his sorrow having lost Takahata,
Sure.
Mm.
is that he was like refocused around the heron, and then the heron became this character that evolved and became because they have this really aggressive relationship. Because in the beginning here, the heron is scary
Yes.
and it's like evil, and it's doing the heron voice and screaming at people, at him, and threatening him in strange ways.
Yes.
It's
Sure.
scary.
I
And
would
then
say the
eventually they
herons-
become like not friends.
I was going to say, like,
Uneasy
they
Ally
have an
vibes.
uneasy ally thing, which I
Yeah.
really like. It's never becomes a buddy movie of like,
No.
okay, we both have one of the same things. They're always kind of annoyed at each other.
Do we have any understanding of how Boy and the Heron became the American title?
That's just what
and-
they decided to call
okay.
it because they thought "How Do You Live" was a too inscrutable a title for the American audience.
Because do any of the other films have a title that is not a direct
Yes.
translation? Okay.
Lots of them. do.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Like Castle in the Sky is called Laputa.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, in or whatever. You know, yes, they often have totally. And obviously, like Spirited Away is called The Spiriting Away of Sen and Chihiro. There's stuff like that
Mm.
where
I will say, I think
they
the title,
simplified.
I think the Boy and the Heron undersells what the film is
I
about.
do too. It puts a weird focus on that only.
I think if you're a generic
So what
American
should it be
audience,
called?
you're
Grand
like,
Uncle's Dreamscape Adventure.
Well, that kind of gives up the ending.
Okay, fine.
I think it should be called.
The Boy versus the Parakeets.
I mean, How Do You Live is just such an evocative
Of course,
title.
but like,
Magic Rock Castle,
if it was
That's
called,
kind of fun.
sure.
Castle in the water,
Mm.
Castle in the ground.
How
He's
do you
like, this
say
is part
the
of my
name
castle in a place.
of
Yeah.
the little bubbly spirits? How do you say their name?
Wara Wara.
I would call the movie "And Introducing Wara Wara."
They were really the breakouts for you.
Absolutely. Did you not see the delightful floating creatures?
No, I
on the
saw
that
screen?
that literally took like a big deep breath and then floated into the sky.
Yeah.
That's like I love that. Okay, so Mihiro's aunt is pregnant with a child.
Let's also say, just even from the introduction of the heron, you're like, the fuck? Why does he have teeth?
Yes.
And before the full transformation's happening, you do have the very unsettling effect where you'll like see the nose start to slip under the beak.
Right.
Yes.
And you're like, why is
And
there
the
a
eyes
face
slip out of the
inside
eyes,
of his
yeah.
mouth? Yeah.
But you're also like, I love this.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least I am.
No,
I'm
no,
like,
I was, yeah, it's cooking for me, but it is deeply upsetting.
Yes. It's very
Yeah,
upsetting.
so- Okay, so his dad's basically abandoning him here because
Yes.
he's kind of like, I'm going off to work.
Busy to make airplane canopies.
As
yes.
you
And his dad
referenced-
makes airplane canopies. Yeah.
Yeah.
as you referenced earlier, they have a car, which is
Yes.
unusual. He drives him to school. That's no good for him.
Yes.
He has a horrible experience at school so bad that he hits himself in the head with a rock
Yes.
and starts bleeding
Repeatedly.
to try and like get out of school, essentially.
Yes. And I think
Is
just
that the read you had on it? That
See-
he was trying to get out of school?
I'm trying to remember it exactly how it like develops now, but right, it's after he's bullied, right? Like the kid fights him.
he's bullied, but I see him as being so distraught.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's a classic. I'm trying to feel something.
Right.
I think it's self-harm really
Yes.
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
than
100%.
calculated.
Oh,
Yeah.
That he's so angry and so he's got this grief that he has not
Yeah.
processed. He doesn't know where to put it.
Right.
And it comes out.
It's a
in
physical
He's
Self-harm.
flashing back
Yes.
to the flames as well. Obviously, you keep seeing the weird digital flamey stuff.
Yes. And he's having these visions of his mother. And I think it's this grief that's not been processed.
Yes.
And I think they reference at the end is that's why he's like, I can't accept this honor because I have malice. I have flaw. I've done this thing. And it's like part of it is that everyone has these scars that are within themselves. And so yeah, he hits a rock into his head and makes himself bleed. And
It's
then
very
everyone,
nasty.
yeah, and everyone in the home tries to care for him and take care of him. But at the same time, his aunt is pregnant. And he has a strange relationship with her because she's new mom,
Mhm.
but has not yet processed the loss of his.
Yeah, and she's not mean or anything. She's quite
No.
kind, but it's right. The
Yeah.
dynamic is so.
Yeah, he's
So
12.
fraught,
And he's going
yeah.
through all this stuff, and then he visits her. That's what happens next, right? Is like he visits her because like he hasn't visited her, and
Mhm.
the old ladies are like, "You have to go visit."
Yeah,
her.
they they talk to each other.
yeah, but it's like a very cold relationship. And then that's when he discovers he finally follows the heron and then makes it to the castle that he cannot get into.
He crawls into the castle. It's this weird ruin.
Yeah.
The old ladies come get him out, and they're like, "Don't fucking go in there."
Yeah,
Then he hits himself in the head with the rock.
right.
Then he's bedridden and he has a big bandage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the
And a
heron,
cool undercut to accommodate the scar.
very true.
It
looks
is
kind of
very
looks
true.
kind of cool now.
Yeah.
And then the heron's being a pain, so he's like, "I'm going to fight the heron." And he swings like a stick. He goes
Yeah.
and challenges the heron and swings a stick at him. And that's when the heron's like, "All right, good job." And they sort of have their first kind of showdown, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And the heron's like, "Your mom wants you. You got to go find your mom."
Yeah.
And
And does the heron's there? I don't know what the order of events is, but basically the heron's like, your mom's still alive.
Yeah. yes. And the boy's like, "No,
have to go
she's
rescue
not.
her."
Like, this is
Yeah.
horrible of you." And the heron's like, no, it's just human trickery. Like, you just got to go get your mom.
Yeah.
He faints.
I think they say, "Did you see her body?"
right.
Yeah, which is like its own.
You don't know this classic human trick.
Yeah, and it's like such a cruel thing to say to a child,
Yeah.
right? Is it's like, did you see her body? And then like that brings up, I'm sure, all of these things for this kid who's like, no, when you're a kid, you don't witness death in that regard. It's like shielded from you.
Sure.
It's taken away from you.
I mean,
where it's like,
the heron's going full, let me be frank on him.
He says,
Come to think of
Your
it, you never
presence
did see
is-
my body.
oh my gosh.
That's one of the things he says.
you know that video better than I.
Yeah, because it's my audition piece. Every year I go and perform it for the Juilliard judges.
I'm going to say this with all due respect to
Yeah.
Miyazaki-san and his wonderful artistry, but at this point, the heron is saying like your presence is requested. Is like bashing his wings around, and his eyes are bulging out of his beak,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and his nose, which looks like balls, looks like a big old ball sack.
Sure.
Can we just agree on that?
This was the thing you
The
say with
big-
respect to Miyazaki.
Exactly. I don't want to imply that I don't like appreciate his artistic
But
choices.
you think he has a scrotum nose that's coming out from under his beak? Yeah.
I just want to make sure
I don't
everyone
remember
agrees
that.
with me.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I didn't. That didn't read as
okay.
nuts.
Well, how about I show you guys an image, and
Okay.
you guys can tell me if I'm crazy for thinking this looks like balls.
Flip it around.
It just lets he's
Okay.
taking out the knife.
Okay.
This is the section. This is the section of the podcast where we wait for David to find.
It's kind of.
In that one shot,
I mean, even that.
Yeah.
Right?
Here's
Get
the thing.
you another one.
Here's what I'm
then.
gonna say. With all due respect,
I need more wrinkle.
with all.
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe it's a young ball sack.
smoothest scrot I've ever
Okay.
seen.
Okay. With all due respect to you, David, it worries me that that's what you think.
I'm not saying that's exactly
Okay.
what they look
Okay.
like.
Okay.
Did you think it looked like that, or did you think Miyazaki's intent was
I
a
can't
think
believe
his
dick
intent
and balls
was
is going to
crazy
come out of this
freakish
heron's
nose.
mouth?
Are
Like-
your balls wrapped in a beak?
It would be funny if I was like, before having sex with a new person, I was like, just my penis is totally normal.
Yeah.
My balls will be emerging from a beak.
I can't. I'm
They will
appalled.
slowly cough out.
And they do have eyes above them, but they cannot see.
They are surrounded by teeth, but the teeth don't hurt.
God, what?
But they're large. They seem too large for the beak they're coming out of.
Guys, this is the last film of Miyazaki. This
Well,
is
he
such.
did it.
This
He
is such a.
built a bow and
We can't
arrow.
do this.
This is
we
a
can't do
David,
this to
look at
Miyazaki.
David.
Quite crucially, he takes some of the discarded feathers from the heron.
And I know it's ironic that I'm the one saying. We
Well,
have
you
to
said it was a
refocus.
no bits episode.
Listen.
You called it.
That's what's honestly scariest.
Mm.
Is that wasn't a bit.
That wasn't
David was serious.
David
I-
was serious.
yeah.
He had tears
sorry,
in his
yes.
eyes when he said
David,
that.
he makes the arrow.
He makes the arrow, and he makes the arrow from the flechette, the tip, not the tips, the other side from the heron's feathers, which is going to be sort of an important weapon later,
Yes.
right? That he has
Mhm.
his own magic to use against him, basically. And then he goes off. Then the lady of the house disappears, right? That's
Yes.
the big inciting incident.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's
And-
not like he goes off on his own just because the heron's being such a pain in the ass to him.
And I
It's
think
once she disappears, he's like, okay, I guess I must now travel into this place.
And I think that's a really important moment
Yeah.
because he sees her walk into the woods. And this is someone who he doesn't hate, but he is feeling a level of separation from because of his situation.
Mhm.
Right.
And yet he feels some sense of responsibility for this person who he knows
Yeah.
he does care for to some degree and wants to have in his life. Even if right now he has this indignance about the situation he is in, what draws him into the adventure is going to help this person who he knows
Right.
his dad loves and who he knows is trying to love him.
Mhm.
And it's his mother's sister. Like,
Yeah.
that's important, obviously. Like,
But I think that's very important. 'Cause like you said, this is not he's not going into this selfishly.
Right.
In fact,
he's not trying to just escape or run away. Yeah.
that's also the moment that sends us into the adventure also is that we'll get there in a minute, but he then goes into the woods or everyone's trying to look for her,
Yeah.
right? That's what happens next.
Yeah. And then he goes to the big, creepy, archway tunnel that lights up with all the books. The maid is with him going like, you can't go. Like,
Yes.
like all that.
The mirror made Kiriko, and
Yes.
then the castle opens for him, and the heron summons him inside, and that's when the heron is like, "Come in,
Right.
get in here, come hang out, adventure." I don't know what the exact line is. That's sort of just a rough. That's my dub of it.
But also, so much. There is such a sourness to his tone
Yes,
at all times.
The
It's not
heron?
even like, it's not even like, oh, he's kind of cranky and he's got like a voice. Like he's very
Yeah.
He's aggressive.
antagonistic.
He's not a little stinker. He's worse than that.
Yes.
There's something upsetting about
there's
it.
He's
something
like a
kind of vile. about
yes.
it.
Now,
yes.
I wonder if the dub will soften that at all.
But it
but,
sounds
yeah.
like Arpats is going full, asshole with it. Little asshole. He's a little asshole.
Again, this is 45 minutes into the movie. Is
Mhm.
that he's finally inside the castle.
Yes.
He's in this big room with the sun painted on the floor.
Mhm.
His mother supposedly is like lying on a couch in front of him, right? The heron is there. This is the first time I think a lot of the audience is thinking like, okay,
Now the movie's.
we're in a Miyazaki movie in
Right.
another world.
Sure.
Like, okay.
he tries to touch the mother and she like is made out of water.
It's such a cool
Yeah, it's just like a
image.
jello.
She
kind
reacts
of,
like
yeah.
a puddle
Yeah.
almost.
She melts.
Yeah.
She melts,
Yeah.
and it's
Yes.
horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's again this
And he's
moment.
mad. He's like, you can't do this to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, but some moments you think of a kid who lost his mother, and then it's like there she is, and just wanting to touch her, and then her turning into this like it's like horrific.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Well,
what I think so
yeah.
interesting about this is that so much of what is drawing this character forward is this trauma and this scar.
Mhm.
And it's not,
A sense of exploration that maybe a lot of young Miyazaki heroes have.
but what's interesting,
Yeah.
right, is it's not that he believes that his mom is alive
Mhm.
or that he believes he's good. It's that he's being told by this evil force,
Yeah.
if only you do more right now, you could
Yeah.
get your mother back,
Yeah.
which is such an interesting take on that, because I think there's a softer version of that where it's like, the naivete of a child and trying to, and then reality. No, this is a dark voice inside the world that's trying to tell him, if you just do more, you can get this thing back.
I would say he almost reacts as if he never fully believes it. Like, he is very wary of what the Heron is selling him, even as he moves forward through this, which makes the sort of jellification of the mom even more upsetting.
Right.
Where
And
it's
that's
like,
why,
why put him through this whole fucking
and that's why he keeps bringing up Natsuko, his aunt, and his father's new wife,
Yeah.
as being as important to him as this goal, is because
she exists,
and
she is a tangible present thing.
and his father loves her.
Yes.
And he brings that up
Yeah.
as that's part of his motivations. I have to do this for my dad also.
Right.
And that's such an interesting thing. That's what driving the character is, this thing that he's being taunted at to maybe you can solve this, and this thing that is someone else's relationship that is not the thing that, but he knows that it's his responsibility to try to seek something there.
Mhm.
That's a really interesting motivation.
Yeah.
Because then they have this whole battle scene or fight between the heron and
where
the
he
boy.
shoots the arrow at him and he actually, penetrates his.
That's when he gets the hole
Beak.
through the beak.
Yes.
Yes, and that's
And-
the moment at which the heron starts actually being a sort of reluctant ally.
his head. But the thing is,
He's fully vomited his own head out of his
he's
bird mouth.
he's being a huge pain in the ass, but in a way that's kind of threatening and scary. And then finally, like after this battle, all the way up at the top of the stairs,
Mhm.
like there's this shadowy old man
Yeah.
who says, like, "Foolish bird, like be his guide."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Bitch, like where were you before?" And he keeps,
Shadow Man?
yeah, it's grand uncle.
I know.
He keeps doing this in the movie, popping in and being like, "I told you, stop trying to kill or torment this boy.
Uh-huh.
You're supposed to be his guide." And the heron will go like, "Yeah, okay." And then the minute he's gone, he's like, "Fuck you."
And-
he never really turns around on it.
And to me, that's a reading of, from what I'm projecting to that from my own life, is that's that constant struggle with our own traumas and the things that we're trying to
Mhm.
reckon with, and the things inside us that are taunting us to move forward. And at some point, those things are both our antagonist and also our guide. And when Mahito, is able to assert some sort of control through this sort of magical fight with the heron, that's also when the heron's willing to be like, okay, I guess I'm going to be your guide, because you've gained enough self-ability that I have to sort of supplicate to you to a little bit. And this great force, this legacy is telling me to also be your guide.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really interesting battle, because that's so much of grief and trauma and loss, is like, this thing can both be an antagonist and it can be a guide.
Terrific point.
It's sort of reminding me of another dynamic.
Yeah.
Spawn and Violator.
Griffin has a big thumbs up from the bathroom.
Ben,
Like the thumbs up at the end of T2.
I have been
Griffin's
trying to put my finger on who the fucking heron reminds me of. You're totally right. Now, the difference, of course, is this is a little boy, not a dead, secret agent who became a hell superhero or whatever the fuck Spawn is.
They're different in that sense. Yeah.
It's funny how the movie Spawn, which you went to see without me in theaters, I was very jealous. I yelled at Alex Perry for weeks about it.
Wait, the original Spawn?
Yeah, the 90s Spawn. Like the Alamo,
Alamo did like
I
a
was my brain was so scrambled. I was like, wait, that came out in like 1995.
You guys went to see it. I rewatched it recently just for fun. What a picture, obviously.
Leguizamo's best work.
A brave.
You haven't
performance
revisited
from
the
John
past,
Leguizamo.
sir.
I haven't. And I haven't revisited Spawn since I saw it in theaters.
But
in
yes,
the 90s
Violator
also.
is technically there to help Spawn understand things.
Right.
But he's also kind of a villain. I mean, he is the villain.
Yeah.
and he's mean the whole time.
He sucks.
Beyond that, he sucks so hard.
I wish there was some sort of cue that they could give us that he was. That's what's interesting is like Spawn soft plays that he's a villain because they name him. What do they name him?
Violator,
And what's he look like?
a little clown.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it.
Like 2 seconds into the movie, he's like, I farted. Oh no, that was a wet one. Like pulling his pants out and being like, do you see poo on the? It's like,
We're talking about how much clown sucks.
yeah.
When I saw that movie for the first time, I contended to my father that Leguizamo was robbed of an Oscar nomination,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw it in 35 millimeter a couple months ago.
Did.
As it
and-
was intended.
As it was intended, in gorgeous 35 millimeter. And the second Leguizamo came on screen, what you're describing basically, his like off-camera dialogue, I turned to Ben. I was like, "This is the worst performance,
It's
the most insufferable characterization in the history of cinema."
He's disgusting.
He sucks. He's a bad Hank.
I haven't seen it since
He's
the
a terrible
90s.
Hank.
I still think it's good.
that movie is too fucking awful to hate in a way. You're kind of like, I love this.
There are moments of genuine something.
There's some moments of something, and then there's moments like where they go to hell and
Yeah.
it looks like, PlayStation -1 graphics.
Yeah.
And you're like, these sweeties put this in theaters. Like, this is what they had for
And
us.
it was directed by the guy who basically was one of the two dudes responsible for the CGI breakthroughs at ILM that allowed Jurassic Park, where they were like, well, you've cracked the code on computer effects.
right.
Go show us everything you've got in this movie.
He also did like the T-1000 and
Yeah.
all that. Right. And
AZ Dippy?
Mark AZ Dippy. Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, Spawn miniseries, Mark AZ Dippy miniseries coming 2027.
We could do a Spawn episode.
But the Heron,
If Ben chooses it.
I mean, I think
There's-
it'd be.
It's a rich text.
I remember.
I think there's a lot to say.
There's a lot to say, clearly.
not just the that we just said. There's more.
A lot more.
Absolutely.
I remember there being a ton of behind the scenes featurettes about how hot the costume is that Leguizamo had to be in and how
Yes.
it was so.
It definitely
took-
doesn't look comfortable.
Four
He's
hours
also
to put
walking
on.
in a squat the whole time.
Yes, the whole thing is fucking insane. You
I don't
sort of
remember it.
admire the performance, except for that it's the worst.
It's the worst.
You're sort of like, I can't believe how committed he is to this.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
He had a really strong take on the character, which is, what if the audience hated Beetlejuice?
Everyone hates Beetlejuice in the movie too. It's
Well,
beyond,
the,
yeah.
the movie. I'm saying it, the
No,
audience,
the
every
audience
time he
too is
comes
like,
on screen, it's
go
like,
away.
fucking come on.
well,
No, the worst thing about Spawn is that he has to deliver all of the exposition.
Yeah.
He's the only character in that movie that knows what's going on.
Until Cagliostro comes in the last 20 minutes and is just like, here's everything that hasn't made sense for the
That's
last
right.
2 hours.
He's hanging out. I forgot about Cagliostro.
But he doesn't start explaining stuff until
no,
late.
usually he's like, Spawn, you have to listen to me. And Spawn's like, what? And then Violet is like,
Spawn.
you know?
Truly, he will enter scenes just doing that.
one of the original comic book movies.
Yeah.
There's two
Before
things I
its
have to
time.
say, and we still have like an hour plus left of Boy and Heron plot to untangle.
Yeah.
We really
And
need
2 hours of Spawn plot.
We need to no, that movie is a tight 71 minutes long. What are you
It's
talking
got 2 hours worth of story.
about?
When they say feature film, they spell feature differently. It's like when they
FEET.
how KFC had to turn into like just KFC. They're like, this is a feature.
Feature.
film.
It's a
Film.
PHILM.
We need to order lunch because
Okay.
we're gonna have to record another episode right after this one. So let me know what you guys want. And what's the other thing? Oh, we have to record another episode right after this one. Right, that's what it is.
Thank you
Okay,
for reminding.
so he gets transported to a beach
Uh-huh.
and he sees all these ships sailing by.
What we
Go
have
ahead.
not mentioned yet, only in passing, is that the Heron is a man.
He is there's a little man inside the heron. He
Yeah.
has a big nose and crazy teeth,
Yeah.
but he is
Male pattern
He-
baldness.
he is a little DeVito inside the heron.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's someone. He's even got a little bit. He's DeVito meets Polito, perhaps. He's got a little John Polito in him.
There's a little Gonzo in there.
There's a little Gonzo. David is
Gonzo's yeah, but Gonzo's so sweet though.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not sweet.
But even DeVito, there is an inherent cuteness to DeVito, even when he's playing his most unsavory type and a little like, come on, I'm not all bad. The Heron feels like, is this guy just 100% unpleasant?
Right. Like, why am I supposed to even root for this guy? But then he is also little.
There's a little bit of monkey bone in the Heron.
A lot of monkey
Yeah.
bone in the Heron.
Well, Miyazaki's favorite film of the 2000s.
And can I say this?
Miyazaki goes hard against like Snow White for rotoscoping and all this stuff, but he's like, but monkey bone.
Monkey bone was pure.
Monkey bone was good.
I don't know if I'm going out on a limb here. The relationship between the boy and the heron reminded me a little bit of Spawn and Violator. Do you know what I'm saying?
So here's
We're
what
trying to come up with an analog.
here's what he's confronted
Do you guys
with
remember Spawn?
when he arrives at the beach.
Daisy
Just
Dippy,
get stuck in a
A
loop.
view of
The one last
boats. Oh my god!
No,
what?
no.
What? What?
There, Kariko is like, we should go back,
Yeah, I mentioned that.
and he's like, no, we still have to go get Natsuko.
Yes, he's going to get his.
He
his-
could have
his
gone
end.
back, and he's like, I'm not gonna.
No, of course not. He's more okay. He lands on a beach. Boats in the distance.
Yes,
There's a bunch of pelicans
yes,
looking like normal pelicans.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, relative to
they are
yeah, sure,
the animal,
yes.
the pelican,
Yes.
right? You know. There's no briefs.
I was about to make that same stupid joke.
Oh,
He
okay,
goes
got
and
it.
sees. It's just so Miyazaki. This like, there's a big golden gate, and then there's just like a sort of cave behind it,
Yes.
and like a black hole. And he goes and gazes at it,
Mhm.
and this is what makes the pelicans go insane and
Yes.
start screaming and talking to him in human language. Like, this is the point I think where I am beginning to be like, I don't know if I can handle
Yeah.
the world building. It might be too aggressively surreal for me.
I was
like,
feeling that a bit. Yes.
like I like it
More than a bit.
as imagery and I like it as atmosphere,
Mhm.
but I'm also still like, I am watching like a film where I need to grasp what's going on.
It's
Right.
funny because I had the opposite. Is the moment that moment happened, I was like, and here we go. The movie begins.
Well, I mean, I
This is
definitely do
Miyazaki.
have that thing of like, okay, we're in Miyazaki territory. Like, okay, fantasy, animals. Like, sure, that's what he does. I should feel comfortable right now, but it does feel like more aggressively surreal than ever.
And I will say also, because there's a lot of these incredible animators that come from this sort of background of realism, or just have totally different styles. And there's a couple animators who are known for their very specific detail. There are so many giant swarms of things that are so brilliantly hand animated in this. Think about
Yeah.
animating every one of these
really, really hard.
Oh, yeah.
pelicans and it's like absolutely
The fire,
amazing.
when the wrapping, the paper is sort of
Oh,
flying
the
around
paper,
his head.
the paper, yeah. But then the pelicans all swarm him.
They do.
We've also missed a scene where before that, he's swarmed by frogs.
Mhm.
That happens right in the real world. Yes.
Yes, and we say swarm, he's like enveloped by them,
Enveloped by
and it
them.
happens
Very
again.
cool.
And then these pelicans push him through this gate.
But they're also like screaming in human,
yes,
like human Jesus in whatever English,
Yeah.
like Japanese.
Dulcet tones
yes.
of Dan Stevens. Yeah.
And then a badass pirate queen
yes.
storms in and
Right.
saves him with a fiery whip.
When I saw her, I was like, David's gonna love this character.
Yeah. Florence Pugh's doing her in the dub, I
Oh,
believe.
okay. I was trying to figure out who.
And then she has this like magical whip. She also sets aside her sailboat, and it's like the seas are really rough and really crazy. Like it's like really a rough seas going on.
Mhm.
And she jumps out and then forms this like magical circle and then gives him very specific instructions like keep looking at the cave, do not look behind yourself, step backwards, and then now you are safe. And it's like, okay, this person who knows this world and understands it and can sort of take him under her wing.
The
Did we-
cave is the void, right?
Yes.
Like it's you can't define it further than it's like if you go in there, there's nothing
Right.
else.
Yes.
Did we brush over him needing to whittle the cork basically to fill in the heron's beak from the damage he himself
happens
caused?
later.
No, that happens.
Oh, it
later.
happens later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So he gets in her boat. They go over the Ba, much like in the great Craig Gillespie film, The Finest Hours.
Your
and then
favorite
it's
one.
calm.
Yes.
And then they're like sailing. And there's weird mythical creature. She captures like a fucking manatee monster from the sea.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're kind of like, can someone finally explain what's going on? Right? Like
Yeah.
the movie has slowed down. And she doesn't really, but she does say, like, in this world, most people are dead.
Yeah.
Like that's her kind of big takeaway, right?
And she's like, all of those ships are illusions.
Right.
Yeah.
And she knows he's on this quest. And again, it's just so much Miyazaki imagery. Like these sort of like these people who look like the spirits from Spirited Away. They're like black jelly creatures with
Mhm.
like
Oh,
eyes.
Right. Another
Yeah.
They're like
swarm.
right. That are like
basically, yeah.
rowing boats.
Yeah.
Right.
They're like hollow people.
But like no one is like, this is the afterlife or
No.
this
Yes.
is where people go after, like whatever, like after something or other, right? Like it's
Yeah,
not like
and Miyazaki does an interesting thing where he pulls a lot of imagery and a lot of concepts from like Shinto tradition and all this stuff,
Sure.
but then
obviously he
also
does that in Spirited Away.
Yes,
Right, yeah.
but then is adapting it and creating his own version of it as well. And he doesn't name or specify too many things. He lets them be these ideas where you sort of kind of glean what they are and what they represent and what they're from, but it's never, a character's never going, those are the dead people and what they do is this and what they feast on is this. And when they did it, like you just sort of get these glimpses of them and these
Yeah.
Emotional
Again,
responses to them.
right? It's much like Spirited Away. It's like
Yeah.
who's on this train? Spirits. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And then yes, the Wara Wara show up after that.
Mm-hmm.
Little adipose, like you said, from Doctor Who, or
Yes.
what's another blobby friend from? What they're like is the souls from Soul,
That's true.
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of.
I
Yeah.
thought of Kirby.
Yeah.
Kirby,
Or Blobby.
blobby.
Or the water babies from Elemental.
You clearly, it just shows that you
Jimmy,
haven't seen it.
You're showing your ass on this
It's just
one.
disgusting that you would try to fucking, fake your way through that movie. You got to study Elemental. You got to steep yourself.
You know,
in
the
it.
water people cry a lot too. They're very emotional, so they cry a lot. The
That's
tears flood
the
their apartments.
kind of next level intellectual thinking going on. in
I haven't seen it.
Elemental.
I'm sure it's great.
Their high-rise apartments are flooded, but
I
they
love
don't
movies.
swim. They don't like swimming. They just walk through water and eat dinner on inflatable furniture.
I
I'm
would
JD
eat
Amato
the
and I love
Wara Wara.
movies. Elemental's a movie. I'm sure I love it.
Elemental
think it.
is a movie, right? It was classified as such by the FDA.
Yes, although there was a lot of fighting.
David,
Yes.
Masterclass.
What?
That's who's sponsoring this episode again.
We love Master.
We love Masterclass. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season. Look, it's always, any time of year is a good time of year to gift yourself.
I got a
a
text
membership to
today,
Masterclass.
literally today, from a friend saying, "Can you get me a master
It's a
class?"
nice thing to give to people.
yeah,
And for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Whether you're watching Masterclass on TV, listening in audio mode, in the app, or on their site, the quality speaks for itself.
obviously, you guys may know it is basically a one-to-one class from world's experts in
Mhm.
basically any field imaginable.
Yes. There are a lot of film-related ones I've talked in the past about. Samuel Jackson and Helen Mirren have incredibly good classes on acting. Helen Mirren in particular opens up her lesson with her walking on screen and sitting in a chair and then saying, that is the single hardest thing to do as an actor, and unpacking it in a way that's really
Wait,
interesting that I
that's
think
deep.
about a lot. Yes.
Well, but right. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's obvious, like Gary Kasparov teaches chess.
Mhm.
Sure. Like, he's famous for chess. Hans Zimmer teaches film scoring. He's scored a few films.
Scored a picture or two.
I just like that there's also like Esther Perel teaches relational intelligence.
I think
Or-
I got that figured out.
Amy Poehler teaches you to prepare to be unprepared. I guess that's probably sort of improv-y.
Yeah, that's something I actually do have figured out.
Yes. And then, of course, my absolute favorite masterclass, Noam Chomsky, on independent thinking and media's invisible powers.
Yeah.
42 minutes of Noam. Masterclass has got all kinds of stuff. Over 180 classes to pick from. New classes added every month. Okay?
Who's not going to be thrilled if you gift them a masterclass membership under the tree?
Taskmaster, the character from Marvel.
Possibly.
Yeah. He's mastered it all.
He knows it all.
Or she,
Or
if we're going
she.
by MCU.
Or she.
This holiday season, give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/check. Right now, you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/check. Masterclass.com/check. Offer terms apply. What were we talking about? Okay, she's on the pirate. Yeah, the Wawa Weewas show up.
The Wawa Wee
The Wara Waras. The,
Sure.
the floating soul boys.
Yes. They look very nice.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Then she cuts open the giant fish for them.
Mm-hmm.
He helps. A bunch of guts come out.
Yeah.
And then she's like, yeah, this is for the little blobs to eat so they can fly. Okay. He goes to her house.
Wait,
Again,
why'd you say like, I think this is a
I
beautiful
love
moment.
This. All right. I don't want to sound like I don't love these moments. I think I'm more just like the first time watching it, I'm like, okay, they watch it. They eat the fish guts from the weird sea monster so they can fly. Filing that away. I assume that will matter. What you realize in the end of this movie is like, yeah, sure, maybe there's some dreamy logic to a lot of this stuff, but that's not what's important, like
Okay.
to the story being told.
So that sort of leads to my last sort of big diversion that I want to take real quick.
I'm going to kill you.
Listen,
Go
when
ahead,
you
go
ask,
ahead.
you know what you signed
Go
up
ahead.
for.
Go
How
ahead.
dare he do the podcast?
We're very good friends. We all know it. Listen. Okay, so I've been on part of why I was going so deep on Miyazaki stuff before this and Japanese cinema and all this stuff before this was part of a larger thing that I've been going through as a byproduct of my own career. So obviously I think a lot of my public projects are like a lot of like the weird like variety shows and things. But in the past 5 years, I'd say I've made most of my money as a writer and
Sure.
writing stuff, even if a lot of that stuff does not see the light of day.
Remains in development.
Yes. I'll say here, book coming soon.
Hey,
Book coming soon.
been excited.
But part of that process has been very interesting to me. And I went off an evolution that was kicked off by a document that I was sent that I sent to all of you guys. This is the thing that I sent.
Okay, right. I forgot about this. So this is.
So
Dave,
I-
don't
wait,
get
I don't
too
wanna-
excited on Mike.
I
If you
don't-
can just because
I would like to
sometimes
blind item the.
it might spike the.
you know what this
levels.
document is?
What is this document?
Wait. Can I just say
There's a reason I sound the way I sound.
I want to blind item the
Okay.
company.
Okay.
It is a large streaming company that has a document that outlines for one how to pitch something to them,
Right.
basically to fit into their model.
Yes. So I was sent this document at a certain point, and these types of things float around a lot in the industry of, hey, actually, here's how story works.
Right. I'm going to
And-
say this document sucks. Is that fair? Are we all on the same page about this?
One
I
look at
think it's
this
good.
document made
It
me
boils
despair.
things down.
Yeah.
It makes it simple.
So this document upset me, and one of the things that upset me is that it doesn't suggest this format for how stories work. It demands it. It says
Right.
that if you are going to make a story, this for us, this is what it is going to be.
And it feels retrofitted from analytics. We have identified the commonalities between the things that audiences react to.
The other thing is that it is loaded with imagery from shows that are not from this company, which is insane. Now it has a few pictures of shows that this company's actually created. Mostly it is not.
Yes.
It's one show in particular they're really foregrounding that is not their show and was not created, through this kind of robotic pitch process.
No.
So one of the things that this document includes is also it really heavily goes to bat for the Dan Harmon story circle.
Which is really just a sort of simplified version of the hero's journey type.
Yes, which is exactly. And that was a thing that was floating around in the industry a lot of like, oh, this is this rubric.
Mhm.
So having gone to film school, I've read every one of these.
I wonder how Harmon feels about that, honestly, given that he's like, that's how I process how to write a script.
Yes.
That's not like the rules
It's a
that
helpful,
everyone needs to
right.
follow.
It's not it's not dogmatic. It is
Yes.
a guide.
Anyway.
And this
Anyway.
guide was extremely dogmatic and it was extremely like, this is how you have to do it. And if you bring us something that's not this, you're not doing it correctly.
Right.
And having
Well, stories are math, and we all know this, and technology has finally
plot
perfected them.
armor, my favorite new phrase that you taught me.
Yeah, plot armor.
having gone through film school, I was forced to, I've read all of my Joseph Campbell here. I've read my John Truby, the Save the Cat, this. Back when I was in film school also, so I was an animator in film school. That was like what I focused on top of the live action writing, directing stuff, is the big thing was like the Pixar rules. There are 22 rules of storytelling and whatever. And all this stuff, I feel like there's
The
a
Matt
trend.
Trey Parker NYU lecture that gets circulated all the time.
Yes.
Make sure that the fire people in the bodega.
Well,
It's a Pixar rule.
it's all great, but I had a big reaction from it to that, which is I have a very complicated relationship in my own life with rules. I was very adherent to them and felt very terrified by them growing up as a Midwestern Catholic boy. And so when someone gives me a set of rules, if I don't agree with them, it creates a schism inside me where I get very like, okay, now I need to break these rules because like something's wrong here. And so I went down this tirade or this path of thinking where I'm like, I think the hero's journey is bullshit. I think the 3X structure is bullshit. I think that is my POV, and I think other people have talked about this, where it's like, I think the hero's journey, as it's been adapted, because the Joseph Campbell stuff is actually a little more broad and like what
That's him looking at stories and being like, what
It's
He's
and same
part of
with Harmon is finding the commonalities by observing the things that organically happen and how we process them,
But
rather
when
than
th-
imposing.
when those become templates on which stories are
That's where things get
dictated, I think it's also my POV is that there is a imperialistic background to that hero's journey, right? Because a lot of it comes
Yeah.
from Greek and Roman epics, which a lot of those stories, having taken Latin for 8 years and into college as well, is like
Computer science, Latin.
it's my my credentials here.
But even just the notion that they're rooted in people, quote unquote, conquering things.
Well, the idea is that some of these stories are there's a character that wants something,
Yeah.
and there's going to be things that are going to get in their way, and they have to fight through them. And sometimes those fights are going to be so bad and horrible they're going to feel bad, but actually in the end it's going to be good. And at the end,
it's justified.
you're going to get what you want because you went through all these trials to get this thing. And that's a gross simplification of it,
Mhm.
but sometimes that's how it reads. And then there's a big part of this, which is, I think in Western American storytelling, conflict is at the heart of all of this. You can't have story without conflict is the thing that's told over and over again. So I got into a big discussion with my dear friend, Aaron Covington. Do you guys know Aaron? He's the host of Black Guys on White Movies. He's also the writer of Creed, and he's a wonderful writer of his own right, where I was like, I think there's other story structures. And the fact that we're saying that this is the only story structure, I think is bullshit. I think it's sort of like American-centric thinking and imperialistic and all this stuff. And so he was sort of testing me and trying to get me into it. At the same time of all this, a side thing that's been going on in my life is for the past like 5 to 8 years, I've been diving into the world of like amateur haiku universe and trying to get published in the haiku space. Ben
Did
looks
not know
shocked.
this. You've never mentioned this to me.
This is the thing
Insane.
that
You're absolutely out of your mind. I love it.
once a year I tried to submit haikus for publishing. I'm yet to be successful, so I'm very
Wow.
amateur. But I go down the path of all this stuff because it's really interesting.
Which
to
is
me.
a very strict format.
No.
Mhm.
So okay, my brief thing is that what people think of haiku is actually not what modern haiku has evolved into, especially in the English sense. When you
Okay.
think of haiku, you probably think of 575.
Numerical. Yeah.
What modern haiku has evolved into has nothing to do with syllable counts in that same way. The idea of haiku at its core, and I could be getting this all wrong, and maybe that's why I'm an amateur and nothing ever gets published, but is you're trying to create the juxtaposition of two images as taking, the idea of there's a separation in the haiku that divides into two parts. And so you're taking two of these images, two of these ideas that you put them next to each other, and in their objective nature, putting them together will tell you a larger truth about the world or about this moment. One of the exercises that they do in haiku sometimes is you go, all right, think of a moment that's important to you. Now look to your left, what do you see? Look to your right, what do you see? Do those tell the story of this moment? And haiku is about trying to be as efficient as possible, but trying to distill these moments down to these as few words as possible, as illuminating words as possible to tell this story. A big part of haiku is a kigo, which is like a word that will sort of cue you into the season, either in a literal sense or an emotional sense. And there's like the kureji, which is like the cutting word, the word that slices through things and changes the tone and pace at the end of it. So at the same time of going through all this stuff and learning about the history of haiku, and that's when I stumble upon, there's a thing that is in like Eastern cultures and like Japanese culture, Kisho Tenketsu, which is the story structure that a lot of Japanese writers and things like that are grown up to learn, which is ki is the introduction, sho is development, and then ten is different than in America where we have like conflict.
You still have to call. No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right. Well, 10 is the twist. It's a change. Something changes.
Mhm.
And then ketsu is the conclusion. And what's interesting about Kisho Tenketsu is that it's a different frame of thinking about story. Now, you can take stories that fall within the hero's journey. You can apply all of these to any story, right? Just because you're taking a story and putting it within this context doesn't change that they can all have a lot of these things. What's interesting, though, is that the primary driver of the plot is not conflict. It is not that you have to have this conflict and then it has to be resolved.
Mhm.
And with a lot of the Miyazaki films, there is a lot of plot that moves without conflict being the driving factor.
Processing change rather than conquering conflict.
And the second and third act is something will change. It's not that you finally got into the foe and you're going to have it out and
Yes,
something will
there's not
happen.
usually some straightforward villain to defeat or anything like that.
And even in the movies where there is a villain, it's not that we're going to have it out and then either we're going to get our way or we're not.
Mhm.
It's usually that something just happens and the universe, something shifts in the universe, and then the film ends. And that shift connects back to the themes of what's been going on in the beginning and the middle, which I think is a really interesting way to think about story. And this is another film where I think conflict, though there are parties that are working against each other, it is not the driver of the plot. And I think that's really interesting. And the other thing is that in my sort of adventure of all the story stuff, there are tons of other story structures that come from other cultures that do not rely on conflict or that sort of like a character. Because I also had the thing where I'm like, I don't even know if that a character has to go through change for it to be a story, which is usually a thing where it's like, well, we all know in story, at least a character has to change. And my POV is like, I don't think that is true. Think about Fables. In Fables, rarely do the characters change. What changes is the audience's POV.
I love Fables.
Right,
But
but-
you refer to Bill Willingham's Fables.
And then, yes, exactly. But at the end of a Fable, a lot of the characters don't know what's different. They don't accept the change. The
This
audience
is-
reading it
This
takes
is
the change.
very interesting. I would have to think about that.
But
yes,
anyways.
I'm sure you're right.
And then there's
Yes,
also like, ethological stories where it's like, oh, it's a story that's telling you about how something was created. And so it's not about a change from the character, it's about a change with the universe that happens. So anyways, that's all to say, I think there's a lot of fixation and a lot of the way that we as Americans read films is, like you're saying, okay, great. The fish is being cut and the war eat it. I have to hold on to that because that's going to be a piece of
right. That'll
This
be
will-
important. Later, he'll use the thingy to do the thing.
You don't introduce that character if that character doesn't have Chekhov's gun way of thinking.
Sure.
to a
if in the
degree.
end we
And
need the
Chekhov-
war to fly up to get a
Chekhov
thing, and so we need to
loved
feed
Dan
them
Harmon.
fish to
Yeah.
fly the thing, and good thing we learned that earlier.
But now may I speak on this
Yes.
same topic? So the War introduced. Then he goes and he chills out with what's her name? Kiriko in her house for a minute. And then they go outside and they see that the Wara are now floating into the sky.
Yeah.
They've gotten turned into balloons and they're floating. And it's like, oh yeah, these are souls going to be born. And then a bunch of pelicans start eating the Wara. And he's upset. And it's awful, right? It's like a bad thing is happening.
Yeah.
And then he starts like fighting the pelicans, right? And there's the fire, and it's obviously like there's a boat, the boat catches on fire, and he's upset. And then he goes to see this dying pelican.
Yeah.
Who will one day have the voice of Willem Dafoe, I guess,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, that's a great casting.
And, the pelican's like, we were brought here to eat the Wara. Like, we're a solution to a problem that was created earlier. Because this is Miyazaki maybe, I don't want to put words in his mouth, talking
What
about
it feels like to you is,
yeah, like talking about like the creative process for one, right? Of like, well, I brought this in, but then this meant that made no sense. Then I brought that in, then the old like, I swallowed a fly thing, right? Like, yeah, we got the goats to eat
Right.
the bamboo, but now we have goats everywhere. So we need snakes to kill the goats. So, and also he's talking about the way our earth functions and, what humans have done to it, I'm sure, right? Like there's environmental
Yeah.
thinking, but like, I just also love that he's like, no, this is like roiling chaos of a man trying to like tweak something into perfection, and it only makes things crazier and more surreal and hard to understand.
yes, and that for
This film
me,
is, for children.
when I saw this,
It's not really for
Yeah.
children, but it sort of is.
for me, my reading, right, is that the fantasy world, right, is the sort of subconscious. It's the
Mhm.
internal
Right.
world of a person. And within that, we have all of these things that are fighting against each other. And there's this innocence and this, joy and purity that I think the Wara represent, where it's like, oh, this
Right,
sort of
little-
like,
little babies.
yeah, exactly. And then there's also these pelicans that have to keep that in check.
Right.
And those
But why? I don't know. We came here because that's what we're supposed to do.
right. And that's so much of adulthood, right? Is we have these
Yes!
things where you're like,
Why?
you're like, why do I have to keep this aspect of myself? But I do in order to survive.
Mhm.
And it's not that that's bad. It's that that's part of a job that these things have to do within ourselves to keep ourselves in check. And it's like, again, it's not necessarily that like, oh, this is going to lead to something in the plot, but it's this moment for me that like is so beautiful and resonates. And I'm like, yes, this is part of the experience. This is how we live.
Yeah.
This is part of it. I think it's beautiful.
everything about this is beautiful. It's the same thing with the heron.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, why aren't you helping me? And he's like, because I'm a complicated little fucker. I'm not here to help you. He's telling me maybe, but like, that's not my,
I don't
purpose in
exist
this
to
giant
serve your
story
story.
wheel. Right.
Right.
And yes, after this is when they have the thing you were talking about, where they're fine, that Kiriko's finally like, the two of you just work together.
Yeah.
Like, come on, you can help him. And then, he makes the cork thing, like you say, to sort of, it sort of bridge the
He can no longer fly
divide.
because of the hole in the beak. Yeah.
It's whistling.
That
It's
moment's
funny.
kind of funny because at first, after he plugs the hole, he's kind of like, fuck you,
Yeah.
and flies away. And then
Right.
he's like, actually, it's kind of blocking my sight.
Right.
Could you, sorry about all that stuff I just said. Could you fix it?
And
I really love that moment.
And to me, that resonated to me as such like to me, I'll have these scars or traumas or things that I've tried to reckon with, these parts of myself that I don't like, but that also are important to keep me driving forward. And then I'll find solutions to sort of clip the wings of those things to keep them from getting in my way. And then I'll realize like, okay, I can't totally just shut down this aspect of who I am internally, this thing that this does drive me in some way. So I have to give it I have to create this weird allyship with the things that are inside me that are troublesome. And so I love that they have this weird relationship where it's like,
He says, I'm not your ally.
Yes.
Like, he says it very blankly. Like, yeah.
it's this internal thing that is pulling the boy on this journey, but also is an antagonist. And then the boy stops it and is like, great, then you're going to have your ability anymore. And then the heron's like, I sort of need it to help you. And also like, I need it. And then the boy's like, all right, fine, I'll help you. And then the heron's like, well, can you keep working on this aspect of yourself a little? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, there is a therapy. What I project onto it is like a therapization process where it is like, well, you still can you just shave down this little part of it a little bit? Because like you did solve this, but like it needs to be a little better. It's fascinating.
What happens after all this, guys?
I don't remember the exact next moment.
The next thing is the introduction of the parakeets. It's that late into the movie is suddenly
Absolutely
like,
wild.
oh, so she's in there. What's in there?
Oh,
the
and
kingdom
this
of
house.
parakeets.
Just
Yes.
First they go to the house where the
Yeah.
parakeets start chanting edible.
He meets the parakeets
Because the
including
parakeets are like,
red
oh,
parakeet, who's like, come here.
Your
like,
aunt's
yes,
inside.
Yes, by all means. And then they pull out silverware to eat.
and they explained that the aunt was was with child. And so they would not eat her because she was with child.
Right.
But because he is not with child, he is
On the
eatable. Eatable.
Sure.
And they start chanting eatable is the subtitled translation that we got. And then he's like, you tricked me.
Right.
You just were taking me to eat. But then in the moment, you're like, yeah, man, they were going to like,
Yeah, what do you think was going to happen? But then he is rescued by another new character, Lady Himi,
yes.
who appears out of like a flaming portal and
Yes.
beats them away.
We
And
saw her earlier in the
We
movie.
did briefly glimpse her.
where
right.
she is helping to defend the Warawara
Yes.
when they're being attacked.
Yes. She's shooting fireworks out in the air.
Don't get too excited about it, David.
She takes him to this. No, I am excited.
And then what's interesting is that she's protecting the Warawara, but then her fireworks that she's using to protect them are setting fire to them. And that's part of it is Mahito is like, you have to stop. You're also setting fire to the Warawara. Like, again, it's this complicated, it's so amazing to me. She appears.
So should we talk about who these women are, or does it not? Should we just get?
Yeah,
to
we
that
can just
later?
get to it. I mean, if you're listening to the plot beat by beat, then you've either watched the film or want to understand.
Right? Like,
Yes.
Obviously Kiriko is the maid.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right? Like, is a younger
Kiriko
version of
is the
maid,
old
like
woman
sort of
that he went in
dynamic,
with.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Version of her.
Yeah.
Full of gumption.
Mhm.
And then Himi is his mother,
Yes.
basically, as a younger woman.
Mhm.
And you find that out pretty early on because she keeps referring to her little sister,
Right.
which is
which is
Katsuko.
Natsuko.
Natsuko, who Mahito is trying to find. And so you're like, oh, that must be his mom, but you don't really get that solidified.
I
until
wasn't
later.
thinking about it when I watched the movie, which is the only reason I paused on whether we should. I was kind of just like, okay, another character. We'll figure this out.
Sure.
I was curious because they dropped references, and the whole time I was like, that's his mom, right?
Right. And of course, the heron has been saying, like, your mom is waiting for you.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
But they make it very overt by the end. I mean, it's
the
worth
end,
acknowledging.
but the
'cause
end
it
is
doesn't-
when like I felt like this movie dropped 80 pianos on me.
Sure.
And I was like, of course, that's
Yeah.
what the movie is.
Yeah.
Right. Is like, that's how he can like think about his mother. I mean,
Yes.
it's, but for right now, she's a plucky Miyazaki helper heroine,
Yes.
right?
With magical fire powers.
Yeah. With magical fire powers.
Yeah.
And then he finally is led to Natsuko, who is surrounded by paper
Well, so
spirits, basically in a bed.
the lead up to that is that then she knows where Natsuko is, and it's
Right.
like the castle of the parakeets.
All these doors that like lead to other places.
Yes.
Again, this is all imagery. Like the paper is from Spirited Away. Like the doors, I feel like he's done that kind of imagery before.
And also, we didn't mention Mahito sleeping beneath the table, protected by the dolls of the elderly
the
women.
Oh, he's got this sort of
Yeah.
little wooden. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, don't touch them; they're protecting you.
almost-
And it's these older women who are these generations passed down. It's so beautiful. And we've also not mentioned too that part of this, and I mentioned it because it's thematic, is
Yeah.
that to make the arrow, he
Yeah.
needs the help of an old man that also lives at the estate.
Right.
And he trades cigarettes for the.
who you say is
Aid.
not the same old man.
It
but
might
maybe
be.
it is.
Oh, it is.
I don't know.
You can look. I mean, he's my favorite character. My favorite character is just whoever the man is that waves in the first scene when
Either
the
way,
women are walking by.
Whether that's his entire role or it's the same as this guy, that's your favorite character.
Yes, exactly. That's the best character in all of Miyazaki's films.
What do you make of this revelation of the mother? The aunt lying in repose,
Yes.
surrounded by these paper spirits. And he tries to get her, and she's like, "Get away from me."
Yeah.
And the paper kind of like, sort of shoos them out.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of this. Or at least I have not yet fully unpacked what's really going on.
And again, there's no right or wrong answer, right? This is Miyazaki himself even says he doesn't know exactly what it is. My read on it is that so much of this is the subconscious of this boy, right?
Right.
And what he pines for most dearly is a connection to a mother figure.
Sure.
And
J.D. Amato.
his greatest fear
Mm-hmm.
is rejection of that,
Right.
right?
Right.
Deep within this
Like if
castle
he reached
inside
out
him.
to her and she was like, "No, by the way." Like,
Yes.
Yeah. Right,
if he
yeah,
was
right.
like, if he calls her mom and she rejects him in some way, that will be a second loss of mother that he has
Mhm.
experienced.
Right.
And so to me, part of this is that he has to go and face that fear to a certain extent. And that's also when he refers to his mother at the end of that scene, correct? He calls her mom. Isn't that the moment? He calls her mom at the end here.
Right. When he's like being shooed away, you mean?
Yeah, I believe so.
Right.
But like he has to face this dark moment, and his mother, in the form of Himi, tells him, "Don't go in there." And part of that, I think, is that like childhood thing of like facing these fears that we create within ourselves, where you're like, "Listen, this is weird to say, but like as an adult, I had to reckon with this just this past week at a moment where I realized like I want to hug my family more."
Okay.
And there's a part of my adult self that feels like, oh, like adults don't need to hug that much. And I'm like, but that won't always be there.
Well, and you're gaming
I
this
want
out
to-
in your head in a way you don't as a child, where it is instinctual,
Sure.
Yeah. And so then,
behavioral.
and a part of it is there is this weird id fear of rejection there.
Right.
That's not logical. It's
Right.
it's a subconscious thing.
Am I wrong? I mean, look, clearly,
What?
I had a harder time connecting dots on this movie than you did, and David has seen it twice now. But I almost viewed it partially as, even with it being in his unconscious or subconscious, that part of the rejection from the aunt is that he has not gotten to know her well enough to even test having a relationship with her.
Right.
Right? There are like depths to plumb in him developing a relationship with a childhood version of his mother,
Right.
because that was someone he truly knew. There has been whatever arm's length at the sort of like resistance to the idea of the aunt occupying this space, that as much as he does need someone to step in and fill the mother role, he's like resistant to letting her take that, because part of accepting that is pushing his mother away from that spot in a more permanent way.
Right.
And it's this whole battle of like, is there a way to go back and get my mother? Can I spend time with my mother in a different form? Or am I looking towards trying to save my aunt and preserve her in this
Right.
place?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right?
How do
Yeah,
how do
I
you
think that's-
balance that?
and
Yeah.
Again, just to re-underline it, is like there's no right or wrong answer in any of this
No,
stuff.
there
Like
is. There's clues, Easter eggs,
Yeah.
and so on and so
It's
forth.
the carpet.
the artist is leaving us clues. That's the joy of it. Is that these are these art objects, and when an artist plumbs from their depth and also brings in collective artists, right? The collective consciousness of a group of people making something.
Mhm.
Things are put into that work that are without explanation and that are connected to this universal feeling that we have. And so each person can project onto that whatever they need. That's the point of art, right?
Mhm.
Everyone projects onto it what they need from it in that moment. And I think that's really beautiful.
Nonetheless, this is a film made by an 80-plus-year-old master.
Yeah.
In which the next scene is him going to the top of the castle or whatever and meeting an old man who, like you say, has the most cursed Jenga tower of all time.
Just bad, just poorly thought out.
It's a bunch of fucking
Don't put
bridges
balls
and
in there.
balls.
The
Yeah.
balls are the thing where you're just like, right.
Yeah.
Don't even introduce that into the vocabulary.
But he's this wizard,
Yeah.
grand uncle, who is family of the main character and explains that he has created this entire world.
There's this backstory, by the way, that we get in a sort of we leave the
Yeah.
fantasy world for a second, where the maid tells the dad,
Mhm.
like, a meteor landed here, and that's like the
Yeah,
origin.
that this
of
castle is a giant meteor actually
Right.
that's landed, and that they built a castle around the meteor, and the castle actually is just surrounding this meteor. And then also that the mother spent a year inside this castle, just like our main character did, and then returned and acted as though nothing had ever occurred inside that castle.
I can't tell if I am misremembering this because this film has been in the pipeline for so long without him clearly sort of expressing at early points what the movie was. I don't know if it changed or whatever. But I remember when we talked about this back when we were doing the series, that part of his statement of why he was coming back and making another film was that he felt there was something he needed to like impart onto children.
Yeah.
Not in sort of a lesson way, but in much the same way that like so many of the films came out of, I met a girl who was my friend's daughter and Spirited
I'll
Away
read
was
you the
influenced by her. Yes.
I'll read. So again, Miyazaki never really says anything,
Sure.
but so Suzuki said Miyazaki is making the new film for his grandson. It's his way
Right,
of saying
right.
grandpa is moving on to the next world, but he's leaving behind this film.
Thank you.
Now, with no context,
Right.
that just sounded, you were just like, oh my God, most devastating movie of all time incoming or
Well,
whatever.
especially when the title was How Do You Live?
Right, right.
Well, here's another quote that I love.
Yeah.
The mission of this is him talking about this film.
Yeah.
The mission of my films is to comfort you, to fill in the gap that might be in your heart or your everyday life. When he was asked about the answer to the Japanese title of his movie, How Do You Live?, Miyazaki responded, I am making this movie because I do not have the answer.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if he did, though.
But even the Spirited Away thing where he was like, there's something I'm seeing in this girl that I don't see in movies. And how do I like capture that? And do I need to put it back out there for this girl or for girls like her, what it is? It does feel like he's grappling with like things he wants to communicate to specific people. That is the way he's thinking about his legacy, not in what is this company after I die, not how is my body of work seen, but like that the films are trying to engage in, not provide answers or morals, but engage in conversations with specific people or types of people in a way that is so much of what this final section of the film is about, of like, why do you need to maintain this tower or build a new tower?
I also think it's interesting in Starting Point and Turning Point, especially around the time of Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away, around 9/11, a lot of people were asking Miyazaki about it.
Mhm.
And how much it inspired Howl's Moving Castle and all the stuff.
Sure.
He talks a lot about his belief of how children are not allowed the room to be children in modern era. That's a lot of his interviews in the early 2000s. It's about how he thinks that like the educational early childhood system has like failed children in a large way.
Which is also interesting coming from someone who grew up during a world war, like during wartime, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of institutional shifts that were happening in terms of how much was dictated by the government versus not. It's like very interesting stuff going on. He's mentioned this film also of wanting to hand it down to his grandchildren is something that he's mentioned. Not his children, but his grandchildren.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, he's skipping a certain someone.
Yeah.
Look, the granduncle presents a giant floating stone to his son. He's like, look, that's where my power comes from. Not his son, his
Great
Great nephew.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want you to continue my work. I need someone from my bloodline to be in charge of this. The stone created everything.
And I got to move on. Like I'm sundowning. I'm waiting for the guy to come in and take over this shit.
But
And I have to give it to someone who is from my bloodline and also without malice.
Yeah.
Right. But he also, there's this energy to the granduncle of like, the world can be fixed. You can make it more harmonious. Like you can add
he's
one of
putting a
these
tremendous
pieces.
amount of pressure on him. Not only is he saying, I need you to take over this, but he's saying, by the way, do what I couldn't do, which is solve this permanently.
And what do we know about him? That he read too many books and went mad.
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
And so you're not trusting this guy. He's a little scary too.
And that's a really interesting detail. I'm glad you brought that up. They bring up how he read too many books and went mad. And then now the thing that he's passing down is, here's this lopsided tower of stones that I've made.
Right.
And I need someone to hand this down to who's from my bloodline and also who is like untouched and perfect without flaw, because I'm flawed and I need someone that's not flawed to have it.
He has this line that's like, worlds are living things, like mold and bugs infest them. Where I'm like, you don't seem to have a great view on like life.
He's gone too deep into his own thoughts. David
Right.
kicked
I
his
knocked my head over as we hit hour 4 of this podcast. But like, I know he says something along the lines of like, look, it can be a paradise or an abomination, depending on what you do. But I get the vibe from him that he's just like hammering dents out of the car, and he's just like, I can get it smooth. Like, we're close. I just need to add some more flocks of animals to eat the other animals that are causing trouble.
This is a
here.
great responsibility. Someone needs to maintain this. He's like, I've committed my life to the pursuit of a final form, a sense of perfection that I did not hit, but don't worry, I think you can do it.
Yes, and he's like,
a horrible thing to put on.
He's like, and all you have to do is you just have to add one little thing to
and then
prop
you
it
see
up.
this image of a piece going in, and it's not like you see the piece going in and you're like, you're right, that's what it needs. You're like, that just looks more complicated.
Right. You created a new angle of stability that does not solve the underlying issue
and this guy's whole life work seems to be that like, all right, I've put this piece right here.
Yeah.
And now I think it's a little more stable.
Where did the parakeets come from again? Do we learn where they came from?
I think they were I think he brought them in, and then they started reproducing.
Right, because like the idea is like they are out of control. Now they're a civilization, and they're like, we want rights, by the way. Like, I want to conquer you or something. Like, that's the point of the Parakeet King.
Right.
It's
Have
like
we been introduced to him
out
at
of
this point? The Parakeet King?
No, like not really, because like it's after that confrontation that Mahito wakes up, and then he's in this like parakeet dungeon, and then they're making a giant banquet, and his mother, his child mother, is being like brought through in like a glass coffin. You only meet the Parakeet King once they go up the crazy stairs, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
He's the one who's like, I'm going to bring her up the stairs, and I'm going to, confront the guy and get us parakeet rights or whatever it is.
And he's like, you two carry this thing with me, and like that's this really beautiful moment where the two parakeets get to go into like utopia with the Parrot King, and they're like, "Is this you?
Is this
like,
it?
is this
the
it?
Garden of Eden, basically?
Is this the thing?
Right.
This is so beautiful." And the guy's like, "Stop looking around. Just like stay
right
on the mission here."
Shit is all so insane.
It's so
in a great way.
It's so beautiful, and it's like
the idea being she gets them in, right?
Yes,
they have her so they can like cross the barrier
because they have to deliver her to him,
right?
And so because of that, they can cross the barrier into this like utopia universe.
Right. No, they see parakeets, regular parakeets, and they're like, look, it's us, like our ancestors. Like, that's what we were.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And they're so like,
they're crying.
Yes. And the original ancestors are like, oh, they're just wild animals that fly around and eat fruit. And then they're these creatures who have formed this entire civilization of war and feast, all this stuff.
The unnatural order.
Yeah.
That we have imposed upon a natural world.
But you don't get the impression from Granduncle that he's like, I love those parakeets. Like,
No.
what they're doing's great.
No, he seems kind of disgusted with
he's
what
like,
he's
you
created.
hopefully you can clear all that out. Like, yeah, right.
Right.
Have like a parakeet Armageddon. Oh my God.
And then
It's too
What's
much
the
to
order of
grapple
events?
with, really. You
so
know,
at this point, I am like, that's the point. This whole section of the movie is when I am crying
But
and
this
starting
is
to get emotional.
what I was trying to say earlier too is like I don't hit crying breakthrough points with him. I just start to spiral. Like what
right.
you're saying, David, of like it's too much to grapple.
I don't like you're like, right. I've reached some sort of overload point.
This is starting
Right.
conversations that I cannot handle in my own brain.
But what's also beautiful to me is that during this, what I'm imagining, right,
Yeah.
is Miyazaki trying to communicate all of these thoughts and this room full of animators trying to be like this, right? I think like this. I think this is what you're trying to say. And it becomes this collaborative sort of like all these people trying to help convey this message that Miyazaki himself is unsure of exactly what it means or how it comes out. And because of that, it's like, to me, that's what became so beautiful is it's these parrot creatures crying, looking around at regular parrots. And I'm like, that's an animator that's like, Miyazaki's like, and then the parrots, and these guys are like, yeah, okay, all right,
Mhm.
and I'll draw this parrot. And these parrots are tall, big guys now. And they're like, yes. And he's like, then I'll do that, Miyazaki-san. Like, let's go. Like, it's like this, it is this moment where he is expressing all of these ideas that I don't think he even knows what they are,
No.
but they are so visceral to me. And like you said, like seeing a giant parrot crying as he looks at a normal sized parrot, I can't tell you why, but I understand it. I'm like, yes, Miyazaki, I understand what you are saying.
The one part that kind of hit me emotionally that maybe just speaks to me being basic as hell, and I don't know if I'm skipping ahead too much now, but when he finally puts together that she is his mother
Yeah.
and it realizes
I started weeping.
Yes,
Right.
That is when I was
well,
very
hold on.
overwhelmed.
This is why I'm here. This is why I've gone through this. The whole point is to change the course of her life so she doesn't go into the fire and she doesn't die. Like, how do I Back to the Future her out
Yeah.
of
Sure.
having me, basically? Although he's not consciously saying that. And her response is, no, I look
can't
forward to being your
Right.
mother.
That's the moment, baby.
It's the arrival thing of like, I
Yeah,
don't
right.
care if you're telling me how this ends and how it ends
It's
poorly.
about the journey, right?
And how I know we're not going to get all the time that we wanted together,
Yeah.
but I'd rather have that time
That's not the point.
than change it at all.
But you saying, I mean, and in this conversation of like, do directors have conscious final films that have worked, that have landed, that have actually been planned as their final statement and received as their final statement? Miyazaki's trying to do that while also questioning if I'll make another movie after this and how many times before I thought I was doing this. But this is a film that is basically him saying like, I have no easy answers,
Just
right? It's a final statement movie of unclarity. Yeah,
just to fill in what happens in between,
yes.
sure.
he goes to see the granduncle one more time.
Yeah.
Granduncle is like, come on, man, the fucking rock stones. You gotta make them into a tower.
And he was like, because
He's
originally he's like, these stones are cursed. And he's like, all right, here's these stones that aren't cursed.
right, and
And he's holding the stone and the little totem of the maid.
right, and
Or is that
Mahito's like,
later?
I'm
Yeah.
going home.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go home. Like, I don't want to deal with this. And the granduncle's like, you would go back to like, this terrible world. And he's
Yeah.
like, yes, I'm going home with my mother, referring to his aunt.
Yes.
And he's like,
Yes.
fine, go home. But before you do it, please stack the stones. And he's like, I don't want to. And then the Parrot King shows up and is like, fucking, this is it? Like, stupid. This is
It's
our
all-
fate.
Yes.
And so he just like, the parrot guy puts it together.
Yeah.
And the
Everything starts to go crazy.
The floating rock should
And also,
crumble.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
missed the moment where he points to the scar on his head and explains that he is flawed.
Yeah.
Mahito
Right.
does.
Right.
That he's not perfect. He's full of flaw, and that he's pointing to the scar on his head. And then that's when I think, is it who is it that says like, I have a scar too?
Sure, the granduncle.
The granduncle is
Right.
like, oh, I have a similar scar,
Uh-huh.
which is like, I'm like, yeah, we got this like, everyone's working through these things and these generational things, and then yeah, he's like he
He's
doesn't
undone
want,
by his own creations. The parakeets are what actually like blows up the world.
and that's what's beautiful. Also, is that the boy doesn't want to take over the weird, fucked up Jenga
No.
that his
I'm
granduncle
not going to
has
try
magic.
and fix your legacy and
Yeah.
maintain it or whatever.
I'm gonna go home
yes,
with my mother,
my new
This is
mother.
my
Right,
mother
Right.
now.
Yes.
the person who I'm going to
Yes,
say
that's
that
what
this
I'm
is who I
saying.
want.
And then they emerge with parakeets and they cover everyone in poop.
Right.
Yes.
So
Well,
back into the real world.
Big Parakeet Man tries to build a thing, which
I
is
told you.
yes,
Yeah, he blows
but
it
then
up.
that whole world
Yes.
starts to collapse,
It starts to collapse, and the parakeet man chops it in half, and it explodes. And then they got to get out of there.
and then
The
that's
whole
that.
tower collapses.
And then that's that moment
Mhm.
where they're at the doors, which
Right.
are the Beetlejuice doors that lead to different
Yes.
realms of reality or whatever.
But it's also sort of like, does everyone go back to their timeline to where they
Yes.
belong? Right.
And that's the moment that truly, that really, I mean, it was so that she would choose to go, beautiful. And then he steps back out into him, and then all the parakeets go with them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're regular parakeets. They're not evil, crazy, giant parakeets.
Batistas.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're not big Batistas.
They're not big Batistas.
If only they were. Bunch of Batistas. That's it.
And then it's the rare sort of like Miyazaki epilogue, which is the war ended 2 years later.
Right.
And they went back to the city.
Right.
And that's
Play the song. Get the fuck out of here.
right.
Joking.
He says that it's weird.
He does the Ferris Bueller thing where he's
Miyazaki
like, "You're still in the
You're still
theater?
here."
Get out of here."
He comes out smoking a cigarette.
But here's what I think is really fascinating.
Yeah.
The Wind Rises ends with the character literally being like, "Go, live life."
Right.
Like, yeah, like maybe your work is going to be used for evil, but like the best you can do is the best you can do. And like, you just got to like live, and horrible things will happen. You have to just like keep living.
Sure.
And this film ends not with a character telling us that, but characters doing that.
Sure.
Just continuing on.
I think in The Wind Rises, he's less sure about it. Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And here he's like, to me, what I got, and again, there's no right or wrong answer. Miyazaki himself doesn't even really know. But to me, what I got was this sense of like, you just enter into this world with all of this baggage and flaws and scars that you're going to pick up along the way, and things that will get in your way, but also drive you. And it's this complicated thing.
Enter into a world that is overwhelming, that is on the verge of toppling over and collapsing. Yeah.
And you try to create some sort of structure and order. And there is a hope that you can pass that down and that will be meaningful.
Right.
But part of the process of growing up is learning that you can choose to go your own way and accept or reject or take with you any aspects of that journey. And there's some things you can change, there's some things you can't. But your only option is to continue living your life and not letting those things take over.
I think there's another thing too, which is your life's work being able to communicate the answers that you have spent your life working toward?
Wonderful.
Or is it being able to express the journey of you trying to work through these questions, which in its way provides people the answers of feeling less alone? That this is basically the underlying, like the purest state of the human condition.
Yes. And so for all hands to come together to make this film,
Yeah.
which is this person, an older person who's said publicly, everyone in my life, all of my family members died at age 80 and I'm 83 or whatever. 82.
That's
in a couple of weeks.
Happy
Right.
birthday. Hi.
Happy birthday, Miyazaki.
For him to be like, lay hands on this idea
Mhm.
and help me tell this, that everyone is allowed to move forth and do what they need to do. And I don't need to hand down. It's a flawed idea to think that I can create some structure that will solve all the problems of the world and hand that down.
Mhm.
I think is such a beautiful idea. And what it brings me back to is the ending of Nausicaa, where the end of Nausicaa is that someone can be so pure and so perfect and so connected to the earth that the earth will, in kind, resolve all of the issues and create this
rise up to help you.
stasis
Right.
and this handshake that will solve the problems.
Because it's his way of thinking about the environment in so many of his movies. Right.
And Miyazaki has often said that he wishes he didn't end Nausicaa that way.
Mm.
Sure.
And I would say the ending of this film
Is how he wishes he had ended Nausicaa?
is the exact opposite of that.
Sure.
It's not that if you're pure enough and
Right.
good enough, that all will
The
work
world
out
will
and be
help you.
resolved.
Right.
He's telling a story here where it's like, no one is pure enough or good enough. That's part of living
Nothing
life.
ever gets
is that,
resolved.
yes,
Yeah.
part of life is being scarred and being imperfect, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so beautiful to then see that theme transition through his work. Having just watched them all chronologically, it is such a beautiful, beautiful career that he's built that tells this story. I often think about how people will sometimes criticize filmmakers, and this is a feeling that I have globally across all art. People criticize filmmakers for making the same film over and over again. It's like, it's just the same movie. They just keep making the same movie over again. Those are my favorite types of filmmakers. Because to me, that means that there's something inside themselves that's compelling them to tell that story.
Yeah.
And it's something that they're wrestling with. And every film, every chapter of that struggle is them hopefully learning a new thing or testing a new theory around that.
By the way, when sometimes people will suggest, why haven't they covered blank? Have they ever considered doing a miniseries on blank? The people that David and I disregard the most as they would not be interesting to talk about are the people who do not do that, which is not to say the people who make wildly different types of films. It's the people who make films that might seem interesting in how could all this come out of one person, but they don't by and large feel like they are honest extensions of what that person is going through. They are jobs, and perhaps jobs well done.
Right.
You know?
Right. But box office game, this movie's going to get its ass kicked by Beyonce.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough box office game.
I was trying to think of the best way to do that joke, and there's not any movie opening against this movie.
Yeah,
which is
Miyazaki's
annoying.
going to go into his like Oprah opening weekend of Beloved. I just ate a bunch of mac and cheese and got depressed that Beyonce was beating me. I really thought I had #1 in the US locked.
Oh, man.
But isn't it such a beautiful career that he's built? What
No, I think
oeuvre
that guy
that he's
fucking
created.
sucks. What are you talking about? I love Miyazaki. Yes, I agree with you.
After watching the movie, I was so overwhelmed
Yes.
by this
I-
being the end.
I was not really overwhelmed by this being the end. I was relieved that the film was so meaningful and that I already had so many feelings about it. Because I was a little worried just of like, God, like, you know, he's never made a movie I disliked, but like, what if this feels minor or kind of
Messy
in a way that doesn't really like, you know, excite anything in me? And instead I was like, I can't stop thinking about all the stuff bubbling in that movie.
I think this is a beautiful. I think this is like. It's not. It's funny because yesterday I was talking to Ben Griffin. I was like, "Oh, maybe we should talk about like our Miyazaki rankings." And I'm like, I have no interest in Miyazaki rankings actually, because to me it's a body of work.
6. I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know.
To me, it's and watch them chronologically. It tells such a story. Seeing all of the protagonists change and evolve, getting to this point is so
I have a Miyazaki.
amazing.
I'm not.
I know you do.
Yeah, of course I do.
That's your job, is to have that
It's not
kind
my
of stuff.
job.
Yeah,
I'm
it is.
sick. I'm sick.
You're
Your job,
sick.
I forgot your job is being sick.
Your job is
Okay.
a sicko, full-time sicko.
We need to end this episode. Ben, how long have we been going? I shudder to ask. And obviously we took a couple breaks.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that we're at about 3 hours and 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So, you know, longest-ish episode ever, but not
In the
quite the
ballpark.
record breaker.
In the zip code.
And not that we
you
were
know.
aiming for breaking any records.
No,
We put some ads in there, you know.
God.
I also don't feel like we're stretching. I think we're just talking about the thing.
There's so much we haven't talked about.
I mean, it's incredible. Here's one thing. Can I add?
Violator, we didn't touch on him at all.
I felt at moments the dynamic between the boy and the heron reminded me of Spawn and Violator. And I don't, it's not a box I want to open this late in the episode.
Kind of thing that you can get in a lot of trouble for saying because it's too bold and too intelligent.
I would say one of
If
the
they
best.
cancel me, I'll go to Daily Wire and I'll announce it every day.
I would say one of the best Leguizamo performances.
Yes, no, it's
We just
it's
loop
funny.
back
It's
through the-
funny and it's warm. It's a warm, inviting performance.
Can I say something that really interests me as someone who has gone through a lot of career ennui
We
recently?
have to be done. I'm not saying that in an aggressive way.
Yes,
I'm
you
saying
are.
it in a practical way.
You're
We
holding
have
a
to be
gun
done.
up to his
I'm
head. You should
incredibly
acknowledge
hungry, and we have another episode to
you're
record, and I
holding a
have to be
gun up
home
to
in
his
time for my
temple.
kid. I'm just saying all of that stuff on the record.
Future boy Conan, age 37.
Okay. What are you saying?
That was his first directorial debut.
Oh, I'm
He was
37.
37 years old.
I'm 37. Should I start my career as a beloved
Your
animator?
Miyazaki year.
It really actually made me feel good to realize that because
Because you think of him as being old, but it's like, right, but that's his storied career. He must have started when he was 18 years old. And it's like, no.
and there's a lot of, the adulation of like the Wunderkind, whatever.
Right.
And it's
he had his slut era too.
I'm sorry.
Imagining like Miyazaki in his 20s being like, "Wah, party!
Well,
I'll animate when I'm 30."
it's funny because in Starting Point, he does all these essays where he's in his 20s, he's just a TV animator at that point.
Yeah, he just does.
And he's like, throwing fucking shade at Disney, and he's like really aggressive. And you're like, yeah, this is someone who's 28 who's just like,
It's also a bad era for Disney. They're
Yeah,
kind
and
of,
he's like
kick them when they're down. Yeah.
and he's a career animator who's just like, yeah, that's bad animation, and actually that's bad,
But they're like his sloppy Tumblr thoughts.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
100%.
He's just throwing strays.
So I love that he started his career at 37, 38 years old. I think that's really wonderful.
I think he lived, it says in his Wikipedia page that he lived in an 80 square foot apartment when he was in his 20s working as an animator. It's pretty small.
Goes for like 10,000 a month in New York City.
So we can't even play the box office game because the box office. Well, I guess
Did it come out last weekend or did it just
the thing is, it did eventually have this weird limited release, right? On Thanksgiving weekend.
but it
did
comes out
theaters.
officially on the 4th.
Right. They did. There was a 1 or 2 day IMAX run, and then there was a limited run, and then it's going wide in a couple of days from the time we're recording this.
Its personal results
wide
is not
means.
listed, but
Okay.
the Thanksgiving box office was #1, a film starring a friend of the pod.
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games,
The
cool.
Ballad of Songs and Snakes.
Songbirds and Snakes.
Hunger Games,
You'll
the
never
Ballad of
make it
Buster
to Pan
Scruggs.
Am.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen apart from me?
I'm still hungry.
I-
I have not yet fed
Hey.
my appetite.
I think we can't underestimate how funny it is to add the Ballad of Buster Scruggs as a subtitle.
That
to-
is a really good
The
point.
Hunger Games, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Because we don't think about that as a subtitle.
Buster Scruggs also would do well in the Hunger Games. The guy's a dead shot.
Well, but he ultimately was undone by his own vanity and his commitment to songs.
But you know how for a while
It's
the bit was
story of
always,
many a Hunger Games
Yeah.
competitor. They're always fucking singing.
That's true.
You're like, you're in an arena, goddammit.
Fuck, you're right. Buster Scruggs was built for the Hunger Games.
that kind of like hack thing is like something too Electric Boogaloo.
This is what I'm saying.
Right, right.
Hypercube.
Yeah,
that's our own hack version. But you're like, what if the entire, what we know of as its own proper title is in fact good fodder for other sequel subtitles?
Anyway, Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so good. And just the kind of thing where you're like, yes, we're cooking with, this is better. Like, let's go back to this.
A better time of franchises, you're saying?
Does it take place before? It's
Yeah.
a prequel.
prequel.
It's pretty cool.
It's the adventures of young Donald Sutherland.
Correct. #2 at the box office. A gigantic epic. Griffin.
Napoleon. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Yes, he made Buster Scruggs the governor of Italy. It didn't work out for him, obviously.
Mhm.
Not a very
A
good
whole
job.
movie about a dessert.
Okay. #3 at the box office. One of the most embarrassing flops in recent memory
Wish.
for a studio that's just been releasing embarrassing flops.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
They're now trying to edit him in. Just anything to give them some juice.
Juice the numbers.
Scruggs is in it.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was you guys or someone else. Probably a Paris was talking about how at the end of Wish they have like all the pencil drawings of the original Disney characters,
Yeah.
Okay.
as if to be like, and Wish is now a part of that.
Right.
Wish
I think
is the Little Mermaid.
Wish is
Snow
heavy
White.
on that.
Yeah,
Right.
Wish is Pixar Theory, the movie.
Right.
It is, what if these are all connected?
really?
Yes.
I have no idea what Wish.
Wish
It's where
ends
where
with,
do
like-
wishes come from? All these Disney characters have wished for things. It's
Like-
tying together the Wishiverse.
Like literally, she becomes the fucking Wish star. It doesn't matter. Okay. #4 at the
It
box
matters.
office.
It matters a lot. Don't say
course.
that. We can end the episode, and I know you want to get this over with, but don't pretend it doesn't matter.
Are you guys not hungry? Genuine question.
I'm starving. I told you I'm hungry for Hunger Games.
So you're saying, do the water people live next to the fire people?
They're different neighborhoods.
It's sort of-
Different neighborhoods.
Also, the
Same
water
city.
people seem to live in like skyscraper. I don't know.
Yes.
#4.
lightning people?
No.
No, that'd be great. That would be a great idea. Bring them in.
Lightning's not an element.
That's the problem.
Well,
By
the
their
cloud
rules,
people get lightning when they're angry.
True.
Like if the team they
Wait.
root for in Skyball.
What are the
fails.
elements?
air, water, earth, and fire.
So it's clouds, dirt.
What about
fire, water.
hearts?
I was gonna say that's Captain Planet Erasure.
Yeah, well, that's fine. #4 at the box office, an animated film that made almost as much as Wish in its second weekend.
It's Trolls World Tour.
No.
Trolls band together.
Yeah, World Tour
Trolls,
was the second
Ballad of
one.
Buster Scruggs.
I have yet to see them band together.
I
assume
texted
you
this
have
to
also.
you, but you saying the Disney's calamitous year. February, Quantumania comes out, and people are like, you look at this fucking atomic bomb. And now Disney's like, if we could have something gross $500 million,
that would be
we would be
fine.
thrilled.
100%.
How are we having multiple movies
Right,
end up less
Quantumania
than
has-
100?
and to have Leo eat their lunch.
Leo is so good.
I watched Leo twice with my niece and nephew.
Leo rules, right?
It's good.
It's fucking got jokes.
#5 at the box office, a horror film that already has a sequel announced.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
It's probably in there somewhere.
In part 2, yeah.
Number 6, The Marvels. You saw The Marvels.
I did.
Ben saw it 50 times.
Exactly 50 times.
Really?
Number 7, The Holdovers, which has been doing surprisingly crisp, maybe not surprisingly, but a healthy business.
Yeah, which is why I'm
nice.
excited that it's going to VOD in 2 days.
Yeah, whatever. No one even notices.
Everything sucks.
Okay. Number 8, the Eras Tour, which made tons of money. Good for Taylor.
Maybe my only good
she'd
choice in the Vulture
Taking a lot of
draft.
L's
Yeah.
recently. Number 9, Saltburn.
Haven't seen it.
It's a movie for silly billies, in my opinion.
Is it like in the Salt Bay universe?
Yes.
If only.
yeah.
Finally, something salt connected that's worse than Salt Bay
I
has
will
been
say,
created.
we saw Boy in the Heron and Angelica. They proudly advertise the collectible Saltburn cup while supplies last. I've seen 2 movies of Angelica in the last week. It seems the supplies have
are
run out.
holding.
Correct me
no,
if
they're
I'm-
gone.
No, they're gone.
It's like a buddy journey between Salt Bay and Ken Burns,
Correct.
Number 10 is a horror film.
where Ken Burns gives Salt
Number
Bay
10's a horror
haircut
film.
advice.
We have to start our next
That's where the
episode in
haircut
22
came from. He
minutes.
salted it.
Number 10's a horror film.
It's a different horror film.
Yeah, huge hit of the year.
It's a huge hit of the year.
Yep.
Fuck. It's
Gen Z loves it.
It's not Freddy. It is Freddy.
Freddy.
It's Five Nights at Freddy.
Number
Colon
11,
the Ballad
Next
of
Goal
Buster Scruggs.
wins.
Colon the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Next Goal wins. Doing
great.
great.
Number 12, Priscilla, which has made $20 million.
Yeah. Also, that movie rules.
But it's also like a movie where you're like, that's a tough hang of a movie
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yes.
And like God bless him for making $20 million.
Yeah. No. Well
Jeez.
done.
Anyway,
One of the best films of the year.
JD, I love you.
Love you too.
And I'm excited to record another episode with you
I know this
in about 20 minutes.
What do you think about Ben and I?
You're my favorites. You are.
But you don't love us?
I love you very much.
Okay. Thank you. It's important to say sometimes it's important to hug the people you love in your life sometimes.
I'm a big
Love you
hugger.
guys.
Love you.
Thanks for coming to talk. My stomach is actually going like
Mm.
this.
The thing I
Realizing
want
I've
to say,
had,
but I
like,
didn't.
a buttered bagel 8 hours ago. It's like
Sure.
all the food I've eaten today. Yes.
I had banana bread.
The bit I
Wow.
want to say, but I didn't. But is anytime you mentioned Goro Miyazaki, I imagine Goro from Mortal Kombat,
I do too. Like,
Mhm,
and
funny,
that's
funny.
yes, I
Funny.
do.
and it's funny to imagine.
He's the one with the
animating.
multiple arms.
That's a signal for you to wrap us up.
Oh, sure.
I
Ben,
just wanted to say love you guys.
love you.
you,
Hey,
Ben.
Ben, love you. Thank you all for listening. And we love most of you, our listeners,
90%.
90%. And if you're wondering if you're part of it, tell yourself you are. Tell yourself you're part of the 90. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty, our associate producer, helping keep the show running. Thank you to AJ McKeon, Alex Barron for our editing, JJ Birch for doing nothing this week. Pat Reynolds and Joe
Fuck you,
Bowen.
JJ.
Fuck you, JJ. JJ will not text us 4 times in the hour after this episode drops going, I mean, I thought it was funny and I did laugh, but I want to make sure you guys aren't actually angry at me, right?
Sorry, JJ.
Yeah, and also JJ, fuck you.
Fuck you.
Thank you to
Yeah, you rock.
Lee Montgomery and the
I like-
American Novel for our theme song. What?
You were just like, you got to tell people that they love each other. Yeah, yeah. And like within 20 seconds, you're just going off on your audience,
Fuck
your fellow coworkers.
JJ has to get knocked out of bag. But by the way, Joe Bowen, Pat Reynolds, we love you. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for some links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon Blank Check special features where, hey, we're talking the walk, something that's going to happen right after this and will definitely be normal. It's going to be so fucking normal.
This was No Bits. Oh, baby.
The bits
Wait
have
for
been
that one.
saved. And as always, just kidding, JJ, we love you.
We love you.
You fucking stinky piece of shit.
What the energy
Love you. But
shift?
sincerely, with 100% honesty, fuck you. Now
And we say that with love.
Yeah, we love you.
We say that with love.
Love you guys.
You motherfuckers.
Just do that all day.